Recording in progress.
Yeah. Welcome, everyone. Today is Monday, September 16th. It's the regular meeting of the San Rafael City Council. I'll request the city clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Bushy is absent. Vice Mayor Hill.
Present.
Councilmember Kurtz.
Present.
Councilmember Yeden-Scolati.
Present.
Mayor Kate.
Present. Thank you. We met in a closed session prior to this meeting. I invite the city attorney to report out, as well as the one that was held following the last city council meeting on September 3rd.
Right. Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Kate. There was no reportable action from either of the two closed sessions that you just referenced.
Thank you. So welcome. We're glad that you're here. If you've attended a previous council meeting, you know that we like to start by thanking and appreciating all of our employees. As part of one of the traditions here in San Rafael is city employees can recognize each other through Employee of the Quarter, Employee of the Year, as well as Team of the Quarter, Team of the Year. And I had the honor of recognizing, and they already know because we already celebrated him. So the Employee of the Quarter for Q2 is Tyler Nord. He is a street lead maintenance worker within the Public Works Department. Just a little bit about him. He began working for the city in September of 2014 and as a seasonal employee. In 2016, he became a regular full-time employee. And in 2019, he was promoted to a street lead maintenance worker. His nominator stated that he always comes to work ready to get the work done, handles anything presented to him and the team, and he is a great communicator, working with his supervisor and team to prioritize projects and handle all the jobs. I want to mention that because we know how hard DPW works, and congratulations to Tyler for being recognized for his work. In addition, I'd like to recognize Chief Spiller and the entire San Rafael Police Department who helped ensure that last night there was a safe celebration of Guatemalan Independence Day. There was a event over at the Marin Civic Center. We want to thank the chief as well as his entire team for bringing in so many other law enforcement agencies to help folks celebrate in a safe way. I know there were several I want to name there. I know I saw the sheriff, I saw Central Marin, I saw CHP, I saw our folks. So a lot of mutual aid last night, and everything went really, really well. So thank you. Before we get to the main part of the meeting, we like to include a land acknowledgement. This is where we thank the original caretakers of this land. San Rafael is traditionally home to the Coast Miwok people, many of whom today are tribal citizens of the Federated Indians of Great Rancheria, and we honor their continuing involvement in stewardship practices that benefit us all. in addition to this statement, we continue to work with the tribe on projects that are that we both care about. And in fact, we're working on a shoreline path project that you'll hear more about. Councilmember Micah knows all about that. We will tell you more about it as it gets farther along this summer. So with that, I will turn to the city clerk, and she can describe how people can participate in tonight's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Kate. Tonight's meeting is being recorded and streamed live to YouTube. Members of the public wishing to provide public comment displayed on the podium and the projector is a timer to help you stay within the 2-minute time frame. You're invited, though not required, to introduce yourself and say what part of Centerville you live in, or if you're from outside of Centerville. We are offering closed captioning for this evening's meeting on Zoom. You can select the live transcript button on Zoom to enable this feature. And if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, you can contact me at city.clerk@cityofcenterville.org. Thank you.
Thank you. We will open with city manager and council member reports. I'll turn to city manager Alilovich.
Thank you, Mayor Kate, council members. I also had in my remarks to thank Chief Spiller, Captain Leone for their leadership at the event last night. A year's worth of planning went into preparing for last night, over 60 law enforcement officers out there. So it was quite a lift and really wonderful to be able to support a safe celebration last night. I have some photos to share of you of a brand new segment of the SMART, is it 80-foot bridge across Las Colinas Creek. It's a new SMART pathway segment to help connect SMART Civic Center Station and McGinnis Park. It will enhance access to public transit and make commutes to work and school more convenient. It's 0.9-mile segment. It's slated to open, one second, I'm just gonna pull the photos up. Okay, so there's a handful of photos here from SMART. It's slated to open in December of this year. This was 2 different segments confused together. I think it came from somewhere on the East Coast. It will make this route more accessible for pedestrians, cyclists, eco-friendly travel, and strengthen the linkage between communities. So I'm just going to scroll through so you can kind of see there's an aerial image that's really cool. Oh, that's it. Anything else, Mayor Kate, that you wanted to add? I know that you're on the SMART board.
Just that this is incredibly exciting. When voters passed the legislation for the SMART railway, it was to also have pedestrian and mobility paths adjacent. And this is a critical one that will really make it much easier for folks to traverse this area. I mean, you have to go over a creek. So really, really excited that the fundings came through and really appreciate the SMART board for supporting this project and having it come to fruition.
Okay. Another slide, United Against Hate Week is underway and there's a lot going on. So I just wanted to make a few announcements. There's a QR code there that's also on the website that has all the information for what's going on. I think the banner, there's a proclamation tonight in a few minutes that you'll hear. There's a reading list from the library. There's a social media campaign. The council, mayor, and elected officials and city officials are making videos to really speak to how strongly San Rafael feels about taking a stand against hate in our community. And then on September 25th, at our new pop-up library, which just opened today, 1009 4th Street from 5 to 7, Youth and Arts is doing a United Against Hate poster competition with the kids, which should be really fun. So more information on United Against Hate there. Let's see, we've got movie in the park. There's a ton of stuff going on in the next week or so in San Rafael. Movie in the park is this Friday at Sun Valley Park from 6 to 9:15. It's Toy Story 4. Toy Story 4. That's really hard to say. And city staff will be out there from all different departments to meet with community members. I also wanted to mention the police department is offering 2 community classes on speed safety. These are the first one is on Wednesday, the 18th from 6 to 8. And there's one on the weekend on Sunday, the 22nd from 10 to 12. You can go to Eventbrite, San Rafael PD, resident, LiDAR, radar, and traffic safety class to register. We also have Coastal Cleanup Day coming up, which is always an amazing event. It's Saturday, the 21st from 9 to noon. There's 4 participating locations, Shoreline Path behind Pickleweed Park. I think we have a slide on this too. Shoreline Path near the Target parking lot, San Rafael Canal near 101 Surf Sports, which you have to sign up for that one, and Loch Lomond Marina. So again, this is on our website, and you can scan the QR code to get more information about how to participate. Another on Saturday afternoon, Hops and Vines from 2 to 6, downtown 4th Street. Tickets are $35 in advance, $45 the day of the event. So that's always a really fun beer, cider, wine, downtown San Rafael event. Saturday, September 28th from 2 to 4 at the Borough Community Center in the Canal neighborhood is the second Sea Level Rise community meeting. This is a collaboration with Canal Alliance, the County of Marin, the city, and UC Berkeley. 2 more. October 1st, 5:30 to 7:30 at the Marin Health and Wellness Campus at 3240 Kerner Boulevard. TAM, the Transportation Authority of Marin, and Caltrans are hosting a scoping community meeting on improving traffic flow, connectivity, and safety along the US 101 I-580. So this is a chance to meet that project team, for the community to hear more about the proposed alternatives, and to provide input to shape the project's future. Last but not least, on October 3rd from 6 to 7:30 p.m., we're going to be hosting a homelessness update community meeting. Another QR code for more information. It will be a virtual format, and the entire homelessness team, along with our county partners, will be there to provide a comprehensive update to the community about the city and county's homelessness response. We have a new grant. It's called Encampment Resolution Fund 3 grant, an almost $6 million grant that the city and county are working together collaboratively to implement. And the first part of that implementation will be opening of a sanctioned camping program area at Mahone Creek Path. So that meeting will have lots of good information about where we are, and also provide some detail about what that sanctioned camping program will look like. And there'll be an opportunity for community members to ask questions in advance, and have real-time opportunity to offer questions in the chat as well. That's all I've got for tonight.
Thank you, City Manager. I'll turn to my colleagues. Vice Mayor Hill.
Thank you, Mayor Kate. I have a few meetings to report. On Monday, September 9th, I attended the Finance Subcommittee meeting with Mayor Kate and city staff. We previewed the master fee schedule on agenda this evening, as well as the main library renovation project on agenda this evening. On Thursday, September 12th, I attended Al Borrow's funeral service with the entire council and many former council members and folks from across the community. It was a moving experience to be among people who honored Al and share his impact. May what he did and what he stood for endure. On Sunday, lighter note, on Sunday, September 15th, I attended Porch Fest in Gerstle Park. I don't know if we ever take attendance, but I think by far it was the largest attended Porch Fest ever. So congratulations to all the volunteers in the Gerstle Park Neighborhood Association and city staff for supporting such a wonderful event. I will just say as a shout out, if you have any taste for whatever music, you can probably find it at Porch Fest. I also attended the Bret Hart picnic in Bret Hart Park with Councilmember Micah Yorns-Galati. It was a wonderful event in the community, a differently sized event, but still wonderful for Bret Hart Park. So those are my reports.
Thank you. Councilmember Kurtz.
Great, thank you. Thank you for mentioning attending Al Borrow's funeral. It really was meaningful to see everybody there, and the impact he has had and continues to have really across the county. Attended the city schools meeting with Mayor Kate. The MWPA exec board was last week, and this week will be the board meeting, and everyone is welcome to that. And it's really a great opportunity to hear what is happening across the county, but also specifically with San Rafael around fire prevention and the funds that we have from Measure C. Thank you to our fire department, as well as so many others, for the work at Ember Stomp. Huge success, and lots of people, and a great opportunity to see the type of work that's being done, not only in the county, but the work that we all still need to continue to do. I'm been appointed to the Special Committee on Youth and E-Bike Safety for the county. And it has representation of council members, safe routes to school, the chief of police, representing all the chiefs across the county, as well as others. And we're really talking about what we need to do to ensure safety for our youth on the e-bikes, and really an emphasis on communication. Porch Fest, which was fantastic. I think the great weather also helped. And today, huge thanks to Lynn Murphy, who is not here. I'm sure she is exhausted, but did once again, an amazing job with Seeds of Hope, which is an event that is done at the community center every quarter to serve our homeless community and for those in need of additional assistance. And Humane Society was there, and the line for help to support the pets was there. Everything is free, as well as a number of our service providers. And so the next one will be in November, and the community is absolutely welcome to participate in that.
Thank you. Councilmember Lorenz Gulati.
Thank you, Mayor. So some of the reports I have on September 4th, I attended the San Rafael Safe Routes to School quarterly meeting. They have a new campaign, it's called Street Smart. So you're going to be seeing signs around the county, including our city. And Street Smart is a traffic safety program to educate drivers, pedestrians, and cyclists about safety issues, including distracted driving. So if you would like more information, if you go to the website for tam.ca.gov /Street Smarts, you can actually see everything they're going to be doing in there. They were also talking about walk and roll every Wednesday. If you have kids in the schools, every Wednesday they are really encouraging families to walk or bike to school to reduce the traffic. And also bond with your kids and your family. And they were also talking about the Be E-Bike Safe. So I'm glad that there is a new committee in the county. September 8th, I visited the Station 54 for our fire department. They had an open house. I learned that in that station, we have the only track in San Rafael is 105 feet. It can reach up to 7 floors and is one of the 4 tracks in the entire county. 2 of those tracks, they are actually in maintenance right now. So, and the other one is not fully staffed, which means that our fire department is working really hard to maintain not only San Rafael, but really the county safe. So they went as far as Sausalito to support them with this track. So I'm learning a lot, and it's such a pleasure being with them and everything they do. So I came back to Station 54 on September 11 for the Remembrance Monument dedication for September 11th. It was a beautiful event where we read all the names of everybody, who all the crew members and passengers from AA flight, the different flights, in addition to 125 lost at the Pentagon and 37 officers plus 1 canine from Port Authority, PD, 23 officers from New York Department, and 192 World Trade Center civilians. So it was very, very emotional. The Irish Pipe Band from San Francisco came as well. And again, it was really beautiful. Station 54 now has a new a piece of the World Trade Center that they are going to be building a little plaque and some lighting, but it was a just a good dedication to this monument and everybody who lost their lives, and the incredible work of our fire and police. So September 12th, Mayor Kate and staff members, we had the JCC Multi-Sector Collaborative Virtual Convening. JCC stands for Great Communities Collaborative, and that's a multi-sector network of organizations and agencies working together to envision and advance equity, to have more economically prosperous and environmentally sustainable 9-county Bay Area region, and we are one of those 9. So the collaboration between government, different nonprofit organizations is very remarkable. So we look forward to continue that work as well. And on Sunday, I had a proclamation on behalf of the city for the Independence Day for the El Salvador. There is the Independence Day from actually from Spain for El Salvador, Mexico, Guatemala, and some other countries in Central America. It was an amazing festival. Over 3,000 people were there. It was really fun, really festive. And then I wanted to also recognize the work of the police to keep everybody safe. I was getting different texts throughout the night, and the amazing display and the entire plan that you had in place was incredible. So I think everybody in the community is really thankful for that. So thank you. And attended the Bread Heart annual picnic with Councilmember Hill, and it's my neighborhood, so it's great to be able to be the council member, but also a neighbor that has been there for 26 years. And I'll finish by saying this morning I toured the new Canal Alliance building. I was talking to Omar Carrera, and it's just amazing the work that they have done over there. So I really look forward to the ribbon cutting ceremony in October. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We can tell that life is back in action with all of these events going on. I also have a report out. Many has been touched upon by my colleagues already. I'm your representative on TAM, the Transportation Authority of Marin, and through that, I'm also part of the administrative ad hoc meeting. Some of these dates have been mentioned already, but I do want to reiterate them. So the 101-580 scoping meeting that City Manager Alilovich mentioned is on October 1st at 5:30. At the Marin Community Clinic. So again, that's exactly what it sounds like, is looking at that project and getting our hands around the environmental aspects of it. And what Councilmember Micah just mentioned, the ribbon cutting at Canal Alliance and around sea level rise is on October 19th. So that will be coming up. In terms of TAM at the meeting, they did a presentation on sea level rise. They're doing a whole vulnerability assessment, and the work is amazing. It will be brought to the greater board, I think, next week, and seeing the work there as we make the policy decisions of how do we continue to protect our infrastructure. And then very exciting and very relevant to San Rafael is the Bellum Boulevard off-ramp improvements, which is something we've all been looking forward to because of the congestion that backs up on 101. We have to give a shout out to the county. They are the lead agency. They are doing the construction on it. We didn't have the capacity here at the city, and they stepped in to support us. The design's been approved by Caltrans. We should just have massive applause, because I'm telling you, it takes a long time to get things through Caltrans. So, but the design's been approved. The county is set out an RFP for the consultant to do the construction work. They're going to start construction in December, and it's going to be completed by mid-fall of 2025. That is going to be like the fastest project ever. So fingers crossed that the weather or nothing else takes it off that track. But we know in the data that's been run that with those Bellum Boulevard improvements, it will really, really improve congestion. So we're grateful to the county and to TAM for leading on that. In addition, I am your representative on BCDC, which is the Bay Conservation Committee or Corps that promotes conservation throughout San Francisco Bay. I'm part of the Bay Adapt Local Electeds Task Force. Through SB 272, we are all required, we being all jurisdictions that surround the Bay, to have a regional shoreline adaptation plan with the terrible acronym an RSAP. And so the draft RSAP guidelines were released today. You can go online to BCDC. They are accepting public comment for the next 30 days. So we will continue to give comment. We've done it through the Technical Advisory Committee, and I've done it through the Elected Official Committee, but we certainly would love all of your thoughts. We believe in the ideals of where we want to go in terms of making sure that our infrastructure is resilient and can handle sea level rise. And we need to balance that with all the other plans that we already have in existence. So we'd love you to weigh in on that. The Chamber of Commerce had their annual business showcase, very well attended. That was last week. A lot of local businesses connecting with each other, as well as getting business, I guess, is for people that stop by. We talked about Porch Fest. Amazing, amazing, amazing. There was also Second Friday Art Walk. It has just been so busy. That was on Friday night. I attended an event at Artworks downtown. And on Second Friday Art Walk, if you haven't gone to it yet, it's the second Friday of the month. and Artworks opens up the studios and you get to talk with the artists. So look forward to that if you are interested to do that in October. And then finally, like my colleagues here, I know our city manager, our city attorney, and there were others, our police chief attended the service for Alboro. And I just want to conclude our community, our colleagues' reports by saying it was an incredible service honoring a man whose legacy will forever be here in our community. And we are better for him having been here. So I was glad that we could all be there. So thank you. I know that was a little bit more report outs than we normally have. Welcome to the start of the school year. I think everybody put everything on the calendar. October will probably be similar. And as always, if you heard something from any of these reports and you'd like to comment on them, I will now open up the public comment for the reports, the city manager and council member reports. If you have anything you'd like to share on what you just heard.
Hi, Shinji Sakai Egi. I live over by McGinnis Golf Course. I rode my bicycle over here on Old Redwood Highway between Smith Ranch Road and the Civic Center. And just hearing about the bridge, the smart bridge and your service, thank you very much. There's maybe 3,000 of us, maybe 2,500 of us who live in that Smith Ranch community. And this really opens up doors for us to get to, local jobs and schools, Terra Linda High School, San Rafael High School. This also reduces poverty and provides more affordable access. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Not seeing any other comments, I'll close the public comment and move on to the consent agenda. We have items 4A through 4F. My colleagues like to hold any items from the consent agenda. Not seeing any, I will open up the public comment on any input on the consent agenda, items 4A through 4F. Not seeing anyone, I will close the public comment and I request a motion on this item, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda, the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Hill,
Aye.
Councilmember Kurtz,
Aye.
Councilmember Yedan Scalati,
Aye.
Mayor Kate.
Aye, that motion carries 4-0. Thank you. We have two special presentations this evening. As is our custom, we invite public comment prior to the proclamations for both of them. One is on recognition of United Against Hate Week, which Councilmember Kurtz will read the proclamation, as well as the youth art exhibit in City Hall. But before we get to that, if there's anyone from the public who'd like to comment on either of those presentations, now is your opportunity. Not seeing anyone, I will close the public comment and I will turn to Councilmember Kurtz to read it. And I think, and then Damien will come up as well. Should we have her read it first and then we'll invite you up? Okay, go ahead, Councilmember.
Great, thank you. Just want to say a few words before I read the proclamation. Tonight's proclamation recognizing United Against Hate Week reaffirms our commitment to the Not in Our Town movement. Both initiatives stand as powerful reminders of the work we must continue to do, not just in our communities, but across the nation, to combat hate and build inclusive, safe spaces for everyone. At a time when hate and division seems louder than ever, it is more important than ever to raise our voices in unity, compassion, and solidarity. United Against Hate Week is a moment to come together, to educate, engage, and empower each other to actively challenge hate, whether it manifests as racism, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, homophobia, or any other form of discrimination. The Not in Our Town movement is about more than just saying no to hate. It's about fostering a culture where acceptance and understanding becomes our default response. I have more to say, but I'll save it. And let me go ahead and read parts of the proclamation, which I think are really important. We've done this for, I know at least 4 years, because I've been on the council for 4 years. And prior to that, I know the county as well as San Rafael City Schools has also done this proclamation. So whereas we hereby issue this proclamation to publicly condemn bias and hate in all forms and reaffirm our community values of respect, inclusivity, civility, and equity for all, and urge every organization in our community to stand with us. And whereas it has become all too common to see, hear, and witness racist, xenophobic, anti-Semitic, sexist, homophobic, Islamophobic, and other hateful acts in this country. And we'll skip a couple of the whereases. The city of San Rafael is committed to addressing equity, inclusivity, and belonging in housing, criminal justice, healthcare, employment, education, and all other aspects of our community. And whereas each of us has a role to play in stopping hate and creating safe, inclusive communities and schools for everyone in the city. And whereas the city of San Rafael wishes to support Not in Our Town, a leading anti-hate organization that serves hundreds of schools and communities across the country who stand against all forms of prejudice and works to build bridges to foster inclusion and equity. And whereas together our community can stand united against hate, not just this week, but every day. Now, therefore, I, Councilmember Rachel Kurtz, on behalf of Mayor Kate and the rest of the council, do hereby proclaim September 21st through September 27th, 2024 as United Against Hate Week in the city of San Rafael and pledge the city's full support of the San Rafael chapter of Not in Our Town. Thank you. Damien, I'd like to invite you to come on up.
Hello, Mayor Kate and esteemed council members, as well as city leadership as well. I just wanted to say a few words, if I may, about United Against Hate. And this time I wrote something down, so hopefully it lands pretty well. Hate is heartless actions, toxic energy. To hate is to have nothing but contempt against something. It is beyond dislike. It is a display of extreme ignorance, disrespect, and prejudice. Hate is the root to various forms of negative thinking and behavior towards others. Think of racism, anti-Semitism, sexism, homophobia, and Islamophobia. All words to express heartless actions, toxic energy, aka hate. Like invasive weeds in a garden, hate spreads, absorbing the nutrients in the fertile soil, which in turn suffocates the essential nutrients and vitality of the diverse assortments of plants and beautiful flowers these plants bloom. But there is hope. Those who may have a bit of a green thumb may understand and relate. Weeds may take root, but they are very shallow. This is where the term "to root out" comes from. In order to bring back the vitality of the garden, you would have to take action. You would have to give a little love, so to speak. Using the garden analogy, to give it a little love means to get down to the ground, to identify the weeds, and to address the condition. It means to provide certain action requiring energy or care to the garden. Once done, the weeds are placed in the compost bins, so the energy it took for the weeds to spread across the garden can be repurposed and reimagined. In time, the energy used to produce the weeds is transferred and is released, creating the very soil for future healthy gardens. To love is to see the potential in the roughest, toughest weeds and to envision not only a beautiful garden in your backyard, but to know that there will be healthy gardens everywhere once the energy from the weed is released and redirected. This is to have hope. This is to show love. The best part about love is not only that it's the opposite of hate. It's transcendent. Love speaks all languages. Love is the bedrock of human nature. It's one of the only things in this world you can give without losing. Love, lifting others virtually everywhere. So that's my words about United Against Hate. It was supposed to be a poem, but in the root of not having a bongo drums to make a beat to with this particular saying, I invite anybody who would like to clap to give a little hand snaps just because we're here and we enjoy this presence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Damien. And you didn't introduce yourself, so
Sorry.
that's okay. I was going to give you a shout out, but go ahead.
My name is Damien Oyobio. I work with the City of San Rafael. I am a member of the Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee, as well as a proud graduate of San Rafael High School. So
Thank you. And your work, yeah, more clap. That was incredible. Can we put that on the snapshot so everyone can read it? That was amazing. Thank you, Damien.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Kurtz. We have another equally exciting special presentation, and it's our youth art exhibit in City Hall. I'm going to ask Craig Narmid to come up first, and we will take a brief recess after I'm already giving away the punchline, so we can see the incredible thoughtfulness that our youth have produced. But go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Kate, Council. It's great to see you this evening. Craig Verme. I'm one of the city's assistant library and recreation directors. I also get to wear the hat as the staff liaison for the city's public art review board. And I have the pleasure tonight of introducing a art exhibit created primarily by youth, but supported by a great team of artists who are going to share a little more about that art in just a moment. We'll take a couple minutes to talk about the art, and then if it pleases you, we do have some light refreshments, some cupcakes, and we'd love to take a look. I figured it might. So we'll head to the lobby and take a few moments to really appreciate the artwork in person. I just want to acknowledge the Public Art Review Board. They did approve this exhibit in July at their regular meeting. So while no action is required on your part, we did want to highlight this as a really special collaborative project that brings together quite a few different community members. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the artists.
Thank you and welcome.
So good evening, everyone behind the dais and everyone in the audience. My name is Cheryl Buss, and I'm an architect and urban planner. And last spring, I, along with mentors from UC Berkeley's Y Plan, which stands for Youth Plan, Learn, Act Now, and San Rafael's Youth and Arts, engaged fifth grade students at Laureldale Elementary School in a challenge that was posed to them by heavy-duty scientist, Christy Dahl, who's the lead scientist for the Union of Concerned Scientists. And she challenged them to tackle the question, which I'm so glad to hear that we as a city are tackling it straight on now, which is how can we reduce the environmental impacts of climate change and sea level rise while creating a more resilient San Rafael? So the children worked with many allies, a couple of them are here in the room, and resource people, including high school students from Marin's School of Environmental Leadership, Marin Cell, which you're all probably familiar with, and journalists from Knee Deep Times, and mentors from Dominican University, and climate adaptation and resilience planners from San Rafael. So together, the students and all these amazing adult allies created a series of recommendations for how our city can respond to climate change and sea level rise with both practicality and joy, which is what our youngest community members really bring to the equation. So the exhibition that's out in the lobby, it's called Our Resilient Community, represents several projects that the students created. So to start the whole project off, each student built a model of a home and landscape that would shelter and comfort their family and friends, but also while it was conserving the resources of natural resources such as wind, water, sun, and earth. Then they joined their individual home models together to create a larger scale model of the neighborhood around the school, around Laureldale Elementary School. And it shows how people can come together to share the resources and really help each other out, protect each other during climate-induced emergencies such as flooding, drought, heat, and wildfires. And some of you already know that schools can really be a hub, an emergency hub, and a very important one. And the kids really lifted that whole concept up and really supported that in their work. So you'll see it out there. On the windows are posters that were created in collaboration with the high school students from Marin Cell and mentors from Dominican, and they teach people about strategies. They're just public education posters, strategies for growing food, waste diversion, renewable energy, and stormwater capture, as well as how to prepare for wildfires, sort of the whole gamut. Esteemed Karen Madden will tell you more about that. With respect to sea level rise, the students worked on a big model, the big long model that you'll see out in the hall, showing how shoreline vulnerability will impact people's homes businesses, transportation, and public spaces, transportation routes and public spaces in the future. The students studied best practices for protecting communities from flooding during both storm events and sea level rise. So they grapple with issues such as whether to elevate the city in the protected vulnerable areas or whether to block the rising seas and sort of everything in between. Lastly, they designed and built the life-size booth out there, that little information booth that you see, for the Heads Up Carnival at Davidson, where they shared information and learned about how people are preparing for climate change and sea level rise. And as a little special bonus for tonight, 9 of the girls have been studying architecture and urban planning since 3rd grade. And we had one of our resource people, Patricia Alarcon, who's in the Latinas in Architecture group, came and talked to them about a book that they had just written about Latinas in architecture. Those 9 girls wrote their own book, and it looks like a younger version of the Latinas in Architecture book. So the book and the girls' book is out there in the hall. That was sort of a special breakout thing that we had happen. So as Craig said, when we have a short break, you can enjoy the work, and I hope you really just enjoy it and savor it, feel the joy, and also know that these people in 15 years might be sitting up here, might be running the city. They will definitely be our leaders and our community activists. And that's more important actually than learning architecture and urban planning. I'd like to introduce Karen Madden, who's the adult advisor at the Terra Linda High School Marin Cell program. She could tell you a little bit how wonderful it was to work with high school students and elementary students. Karen?
Thank you, Cheryl. Welcome, Karen. Thank you. And thank you, Cheryl. I always tell our own 3 kids that life is so interconnected and you never know when people are going to cross paths in the future. I had the pleasure of partnering with Cheryl when she came and read to my students when I taught elementary school and taught one of Christine's. But now I teach the high school. So it was a wonderful opportunity to go back and be in an elementary school classroom. Cheryl came to my high school classroom at the Marin School of Environmental Leadership and leaned into hearing what my students were learning about, which at the time was wildfire safety, stormwater capture, food waste diversion, and other topics. And Cheryl had this just great opportunity to have a conversation with my students, and then she just so brilliantly filed it away. So when she started working in this 5th grade classroom with Mr. Belmont, who I actually grew up with, so very small world story again, my students were able to work with groups of her students to kind of share some of their learning with these 5th graders to hopefully plant the seeds that maybe one day they would want to apply to this program that we have at Terra Linda High School. So for my students, it was really wonderful to have them mentor the younger students. And they were, I think, a little jealous to see all the great little scale models that the students were manipulating and playing with. So note to self, I will bring that back to the high school because kids of all age do like building things with their hands. So yes, on the windows, those are the quilt squares that represent the themes that kind of overlapped with what Cheryl was covering with her 5th grade to what my high school students were covering. So I just want to thank her again for bringing me in to this wonderful collaboration, and thank you for tonight.
And the ever wonderful Kate Hageman, who many of you probably know, who's the San Rafael Climate Adaptation and Resilience Planner, among other things, worked intimately with the students and brought a bundle of knowledge to the students and wonderful props and visuals that help them really understand what sea level rise really means. And they're good for adults too. Welcome, Kate.
Well, and I'll speak for just 20 seconds to say another thank you to Ms. Buss and also Ms. Napel. We have amazing resources in our community to connect these very real and serious issues with the classroom and with the students whose own homes are affected. You'll see on the 3D model, some of the students labeled their homes or places that are meaningful for them that'll be affected by sea level rise. So I'll just say thank you. And also to mention that we have an ongoing sea level rise planning project right now. Our resident steering committee members have also come to join us. So they'll be in the lobby and working on this issue in parallel. So again, a huge thank you to all of you for the time and to Ms. Buss and her tireless dedication to the students in the city.
Yes, Craig.
I just wanted to say one last thing before hopefully we recess. I just want to acknowledge there's a lot of adults up here. We wouldn't be able to do projects like these without the youth that were really at the heart of this project. And I know that the group really tried to bring some of the youth here tonight, but unfortunately with scheduling, it just didn't work. But hopefully some of them are watching this evening. And I just really wanted to highlight that and acknowledge their efforts.
Thank you. And thank you for the context of what we are going to take a recess, about a 10-minute recess to go look and have a few little sweet things. And I was reflecting as you were speaking how relevant that later on our agenda this evening is our greenhouse gas emissions report and how it's all tied together. And the reason that San Rafael, we have this as a main part of our meeting is because it is all encompassing. We do need our youth engaged. And to your point, they're going to be sitting up here. They're going to be sitting throughout San Rafael making policy decisions and business decisions. So their input is valuable. And I've already seen this once, but I can't wait to talk to their resource folks out there because the work is incredible. So we'll take a 10-minute recess, go on out, ask a lot of questions, and we'll be back. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. It's hard to come back from cupcakes and brilliant thought by the youth in our community, but we've done that. So we are going to move into our public hearing. The first item is our proposed update to the master fee schedule. And I see Finance Director Paul Navazio has joined us. When you are ready, we can't wait to hear what you're going to say. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. This next agenda item is agendized as a public hearing, the subject of which is the update to the city's master fee schedule. And you do have the staff report of a little presentation, hopefully get us through the bulk of it. I would note that in the agenda item, after just the staff report is the resolution that we're asking the council to consider this evening. And as an exhibit to the resolution is effectively the clean copy of what the updated fee schedule would look like, assuming council is comfortable with the staff recommendation. As is the practice, we've also included in the agenda packet a red line version so that council and public can see all the changes. Most of it is cleanup. I'll highlight that. We'll touch on the substantive changes. And then the very last attachment is specific to the recreation program fees that are laid out separately at the end of the agenda item. Again, by way of brief background, our master fee schedule is essentially the means by which the city council approves and adopts fees for charges for services to recover costs associated with delivering those services, either at full cost recovery or at subsidized level. I note that the 24-25 budget has about $22 million in revenue from charges for services. So it is a significant component to the budget. The current fee schedule and the recommendations that are for you this evening are consistent with the requirements in state law and state constitution around what we can and cannot charge and recover fees for. And while there are a lot of areas where current council policy is established to recover full costs, there's also a lot of programs and services that for which we, by policy, do not recover the full costs, and those typically are the ones with significant public benefit. So there's a whole range of cost recovery in the fee schedule. Council may recall that the last comprehensive update actually took place in December of 2022, just coming out perhaps of the pandemic. In the council action at that time, I think it had been almost 5, 6, 7 years before there had really been a comprehensive update. So what we're trying to do is kind of maintain updates on an annual basis so that we don't fall far in arrears and then have to do massive updates. So the council approved the fee schedule in December of 22, establishing target cost recovery levels. Significantly, the council also authorized at that time an automatic annual increases based on consumer price index, aka inflationary adjustments, and also laid out the implementation schedule for that. Part of the reason why we're here this evening is that pursuant to that action, the CPI index that would apply to fees as of the start of this fiscal year, July 1st, is 2.37%. And so there's a whole host of fees in the schedule that are simply going up by the CPI adjustment. I want to give you an example in the current fee schedule. This is also a link to the website. It's organized in these 14 separate categories, so each one has its own. And we also modeled this report in the attachments to follow along with this. But it's and then an example of a page from the fee schedule or section that shows the fee. It shows also the cost recovery targets that have been established by the council. And so these are presented on the website again in these 14 sections or chapters. So for the 24-25 update, again, there's a number of revisions that are being made that admittedly do not require council approval. That's where we're not proposing to modify the fee, where the fees are simply going up by the council-approved CPI adjustment. And there's also, again, some cleanup where we're going through and eliminating fees in the fee schedule for services that the city is no longer providing, or we've changed how that service is being provided. The areas that we're going to focus on briefly this evening that do require formal council action is a handful of areas where staff is proposing fee increases that will exceed the CPI index, particularly to either maintain target cost recovery levels where the costs have been exceeding the CPI, as well as a couple of categories of new fees that are proposed to be added to the fee schedule. I also note on this slide that the council will recall that on the heels of approving the 24-25 budget, the council already took action related to fees associated with the city's child care program, and that took place on July 15th. And those were enacted early, if you will, to coincide with the academic year for which those fees are set. Given that list that I shared earlier, there's actually no fee adjustments proposed in a few of our categories here, library, admin, citation, sewer and drainage, and then only CPI-based fees in some of the fee schedules related to several of the permits that are handled through our planning and building department. I am going to highlight now the areas where we are proposing some changes and in some increases that do require council action. If it works, I'm going to go through these. We also have staff from the various departments that can hopefully assist for any questions that the council or the public may have on this. The two things I'll highlight on the police services, and again, this is in the attachment 3. They're proposing to modify an existing fee related to false alarm response. If you can see in the strikeout, currently there's a fee set, I believe it's $140 for the third or more responses. So after you get to 3 and after 3, it's $140 per response. And this is proposing to be just a kind of a graduated fee schedule. So there would be a fee charged with the first and second response, less than the current fee, and then $150 for the third, and then adding I think $50. So basically there's an incentive to not wait till you have the third or fourth false alarm response before being cited. And then the other one that we're calling out here, and this is to basically be consistent with changes in state law, where there's now an increase in the maximum amount that can be collected under DUI collision restitutions, driving under the influence. And so this is an increase that's consistent with new state law. Another area in the police services, this is just an example of some of the cleanup. We're removing from the fee schedule fees that are no longer assessed, some of which are, for instance, the massage establishments. These are now covered in our building and safety section of the fee schedule through the planning department, no longer under the police. Also, based on change in state law, I believe since the pandemic, we're no longer authorized, if you will, to issue permits for several categories of street vendors. And the last one, I think, is the taxi permits, which is now run through the county in terms of the permitting. So the police department's no longer in the business. So this, again, just an example of a cleanup in that category. One of the significant recommendations for you this evening is related to fire services fee, and specifically the charges for ambulance transport. And here you have the advanced life support kind of bundle base rate, and then the component rates. Just speaking briefly about this, there's two factors that are driving this recommendation. And it's largely based on both the cost of providing the service, but also an analysis of other jurisdictions that provide transport. And the recommendation is to essentially increase the fees to go from a 55% cost recovery level to roughly 75% cost recovery level, which is essentially what the neighboring jurisdictions are charging. We did cover this again briefly, as was mentioned earlier, in the Finance Subcommittee, and I'll just say, fire staff is here to assist, but these fees are by and large paid by the insurers of the patients that avail themselves of the transport. When you have individuals that may not have adequate insurance or lack insurance, these are not charged to the patient. So it's really a mechanism to maximize the cost recovery of our services from the insurance providers that pay the bill. In the planning area, there's again some cleanup, but one change that we are calling out is essentially codifying in the master fee schedule a series of fees related to the streamlined housing development applications. This was an ordinance that I believe the council adopted last April. The city's actually been charging this fees, based on equivalent fees that are already on the books relative to the same level of effort and time that's taken. But this essentially adds the fee and codifies it in the master fee schedule. So these fees have been charged, but we're now reflecting them as discrete separate fees within the fee schedule. Main one I'll point out for public works fees, they're adding to the fee schedule a category for work associated with special events, setup, traffic control. This has always been a little bit of a challenge between all the various departments. The proposal is to essentially charge actual cost associated with this for most special events. And so we're also calling out that we are looking at how this fee would then be applied, potentially with some discounts or fee waivers for city-sponsored events. So there's a distinction between folks that seek to close streets for these events and some of the events that the city has an interest in continuing to sponsor. So this at least sets the basis for it at full cost recovery. The last section of the proposals really have to do with the recreation fees. And so again, these are in attachment 4 of your staff report. Recreation staff is constantly looking at their fees and their fee structures, looking to sort of hit that sweet spot between maximizing cost recovery, but still making the programs accessible to all the residents and comparing our rates to other agencies in the area. In general, the recommendation is to increase the recreation fees by 5%, with a couple of exceptions that are listed here. The Falkirk Cultural Center and aquatic fees are recommended to have a slightly higher increase. And they've really identified areas where, again, the CPI level adjustment does not keep up with our costs in relation to maintaining targets. And I think the next slide really summarizes, there's a number of fees that are, kind of where there's a deposit that is placed. There's no change in the deposit fees. 5% increase for facility rentals and park and field fees. And again, 15% increase for use of the Falkirk Cultural Center fees, as well as for the aquatics program. Council's also aware that I believe we're 2 years into a pilot program for a fall and winter aquatics, and the recommendation is to kind of transition from that year-to-year pilot to a standard offering. And I think because the rates were somewhat subsidized in the pilot program, the full cost recovery or the appropriate cost recovery target for that program is suggested a 22% fee increase on the fall and winter aquatics. We also do note that per council previous policy, selected programs both at Pickleweed and at the Borough Community Center are offered at 50% discount from the maximum rates. Just wrapping up here, The recommendations before you, the CPI adjustments basically take effect automatically, but the fees that we're bringing to you this evening outside of CPI adjustment, we're proposing to be effective January 1. So start of the calendar year going forward, with the exception of the Winter Fall Aquatics program fees that would essentially be effective October 1 so that they can be implemented for this upcoming period. And then lastly, I will note that most of the recommendations that are before you were contemplated as we were putting the budget together because we figured that we would need to adjust the fees. Overall, there's about $23 million, I said, in charges for services. The bulk of the recommendations in this report generate about $750,000 in additional revenue across all funds, which has already been factored into the budget. The one exception is the emergency medical services fees and the ambulance transport that the fire department's been working on. And if approved on an annualized basis, that's about a $400,000 increase, which is significant in relation to both the budget for the fire department, but also the interplay between our general fund support and the paramedic tax. So this fee, I think, admittedly will reduce the pressure going forward in terms of the need to address the level of increase in a future paramedic tax. So the department's really looking to maximize revenues where there's revenues to be collected. So again, the recommendation before you is to adopt the resolution authorizing the update in the master fee schedule. And Exhibit A to that resolution provides the clean copy of what would be the fees if approved as recommended. With that, we're open to any questions.
Thank you, Director. Vice Mayor Hill, questions? Start with you.
Yes, I have one question, and it's really meant as a rhetorical question to re-emphasize. Sorry, that was a joke. Sorry, to emphasize the fact that with the increase in ambulance fees, that any community member, whether they carry robust insurance, no insurance, and everything in between, that this really doesn't show up to them as additional costs that they might carry. This is really something that would go through an insurance process.
That is correct, and I will again defer to our colleagues in the fire department, but that's exactly correct.
Thank you.
Actually, I have an additional, usually I wait, but my question was right on yours. So you had said going to increase to 75%, and being that it is primarily insurance-based, how come we wouldn't go to 100%?
I think the main answer is kind of comparison with other agencies. So I think we do, as you know, aspire to a very high level of service, and this fee increase kind of reflects that. I will tell you it is very hard to, in particularly the area of emergency medical services, to set the rates at full cost recovery. We also do recognize the fact that we assess a paramedic tax, which funds I believe 27% of the cost of emergency medical services. So there's a kind of interplay there.
No, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kurtz.
Right along the same line of questioning, around the ambulance transport increase in the
Yeah.
fee. Is there any distinction for assisted living facilities and lift assist, or is the lift assist under the treat no transport? Is that a different fee structure? Sorry, I did it again.
Welcome, Thomas. Thank you. I know you've been working on this.
This has been something I've been asking about for.
Mayor Kate, members of the council, good evening. My name is Thomas Wong. I'm a senior management analyst at our fire department. To answer the assisted living, there aren't any special fees right now for assisted living calls. So depending on the level of service that is required, it would be billed accordingly. Specifically for the lift assist, we currently don't have a fee for that. So nothing would be charged for lift assist. A treat no transport would have a cost associated with that. But we would take vitals and other kind of medically necessary treatment even for a treat no transport. For a lift assist, if we're not checking any vitals or anything like that, there's actually no charge incurred.
And so, okay. Yeah. All right. So I guess that is a question in terms of how, we've talked about this a little bit before when we reviewed the paramedic tax, that the number of calls that we currently support, which I understand, but we're providing a level of service that we're not capturing for our department to go out and do. And I'm concerned that right now, they're able to support the level of calls that are needed. But if that changes and increases and we're going out and serving as a lift assist and we're not charging, and if there's a way we can look into doing something in that space or having those, especially if they're in a facility, that it's provided, the facility is able to provide that, because I know in a number of the facilities, they call 911 because their current staff are not able to provide that level of service.
Yeah, we agree with that statement. These facilities, for example, should have people there that can do non-medical kind of assistance like a lift assist. And so we are exploring different models that we can use to try to A, reduce those calls, and B, at least capture some revenue to offset the cost of sending our ALS units out there. It is something that impacts our service, even if we have capacity to do it. It is taking resources away from another emergency. And so, yes, our stance is that those facilities should be able to provide that level of care to their patients who they are charging. But at the same time, for residents who need a lift assist in like a single family dwelling situation, we are happy and ready to support those individuals.
And all those calls for lift assist, it could be something else in addition to a lift assist, but just say it's just a basic lift assist. Is it always the fire department that would receive that call, or could it also go to the police department?
No, those calls are always sent to the fire department.
And so we send out both a paramedic and a truck.
Sure.
Good evening, Council. Dave Roman, Fire Chief. Yes, we usually do send a 3-person engine company is what we send for the lift assist. So one of the things that we need to separate from is that for transport fees and for any kind of EMS charges, we actually have to perform some kind of assessment on it. On a true lift assist, we're not doing a medical assessment. We might ask a question, are you injured? No, I'm not. Okay, what can we help you with? Oh, I just need help back in bed. And those are the things that we can do like that. Now, offset some of this cost through a tax might be a better option rather than fees for service, because once again, we can't charge for that unless there's a medical necessity. And that's the important concept on that. If there's a medical necessity, then we can charge the insurance. Otherwise, there's no possible way for us to do that. So we're not actually charging for the service, we're charging for the actual medical treatment that we're doing. So that's where the difference should be both of them. So, but we will go back and we are having a lot of conversations on what makes sense. One thing I do believe as the fire chief, that we do have a fundamental responsibility to our community.
Absolutely.
However, we don't have a responsibility, I believe, to provide services that a commercial or a private company that's profiting from this is using our services, our backs, our municipalities' backs for the service that they're trying to provide. And that's where we have an absolute, and we have to really kind of figure that out, where that proper balance is. And I think probably through the tax, if we look at that and define what the actual tax and how that looks on there, I think that's more appropriate rather than in this case here.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, understand. Appreciate the consideration around that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Kate, there were a
Yes.
few other questions, and I think Director Navazio was able to answer most of them, but did you want me to speak to those previous questions?
Sure.
Okay. One question was about raising the rates and how that would affect San Rafael residents. So you're correct that these increases mostly are going to be covered by private insurance. Medi-Cal and Medicare patients are already capped at the rate that they pay, and our current rate, even before this increase, well exceeds that cap. So really for private insurers, people that have private insurance, their insurance will be billed this higher rate. For those without insurance, the state recently passed a law that went into effect in January 1st of this year, AB 716, which also limits the amount that we can charge uninsured individuals. We can only charge them the rate that Medi-Cal sets, which is a much lower rate. Also, San Rafael residents, because they pay paramedic tax already through their property taxes, are not billed or balance billed. So any difference that their insurance doesn't cover, we don't send them a bill. And so if their insurance only covers a portion of this rate, if they're a San Rafael resident, they won't be billed that difference amount. So again, really targeting the insurance agencies that are out there that are willing to pay more, as well as it could impact people that don't reside in San Rafael that are using our service. That kind of segues into the second question of why we won't go to 100%. One is that the Bay Area, we would be the most expensive agency in the Bay Area. As Director Navazio had mentioned, it's also in recognition of the paramedic tax, which pays for more than 50% of the program already that residents are paying. Some jurisdictions do not have a paramedic tax, and so their program is fully funded by the rates that are set. So we are fortunate enough to have that other revenue source, and the fact that there are some residents out there or individuals that could be burdened by having that higher rate. Specifically, just we don't control what happens on the insurance end, and so if we send someone a bill for $2,800 and the insurer pays us the full $2,800, but there's a 20% copay, for example, we don't control what the insurer then goes after the resident. So I think we have to recognize that even the majority of this will come from insurance, that there could be some impacts there on the back end that we don't control.
Thank you. No, that's a great answer. We always want to look at the unintended consequences. So thank you. I'll continue with questions. Councilmember Yorenz Gulati.
Yes, thank you. So my question, leaving the, anyway, so my question is actually about the rental fees. So I noticed that our fees compare like residents versus non-residents are not, are pretty minimal. Recently, I was trying to maybe book space in a different city where they charge maybe like 3-4 times more. So I'm curious to see, are we trying to keep that balance so we can have more demand, or is it possible to maybe revise it where it's like maybe non-residents pay 3 times more? I don't know, or something like that.
I might defer to our recreation staff. I will say that without regard to how other jurisdictions set their fee, and there is, areas where that differential is important, we are capped at not exceeding our cost. And so sometimes you got to be cautious about having the non-residents subsidize. So different people look at that with a slightly different lens, but I'll defer to Catherine.
Yeah, I think so. Catherine Kufa, Library and Recreation Director. We have established a 10% differential from resident to non-resident, and that's fairly, each agency does treat it differently. We found that to be fairly standard, particularly in Marin County. I do think that's something that we could look at moving forward, particularly as we take a look at more closely at our cost recovery goals and how we are valuing kind of the different programs and services we provide in that context.
Great.
But yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd like to be a little bit more competitive with non-residents. And then I have a question, or maybe more like a comment around, some of the fees. I saw the renewal energy fees, I saw some of the fees that we charge around, heating, gas piping. And I'm just curious to see if we are competitive in a way that we can encourage more people maybe to switch to renewable through the fees that we're charging. I don't know if that will make a difference, but I wonder.
Yeah, I think that's also an area maybe for some further conversation. I would say that for the purposes of this update, they were looking at the cost recovery level that is in the existing fee relative to the costs and looking to make adjustments to not erode that significantly. But with, again, all of the attention and focus even later this evening on our efforts to address some of these climate and energy issues, incentivizing. But I know it's kind of baked into the fees already, but I'm not sure that was looked at that specifically in the context of tonight's update.
Great.
We'll
Yeah,
carry
I understand
that back.
tonight is said, but
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. Not seeing any questions right now. We'll see if any members of the public have questions or comments on this item. We welcome you. If you want to say your name, you're not required to, and what part of San Rafael that you live in.
My name is Al Viteri. I live in Gersel Park. A few questions. Since it's such a lengthy report, I decided I should read it. I like data. I was looking and I had a context. I said, oh, let me find out if Streeteries is on here, because that's one of the services that the city provides. But I couldn't search that document. I think the way it's produced, it's an image rather than a text. So I was forced to read most of it. I couldn't find Streeteries, but I did have some questions, and some of them had to do with new services that the city provides, like wildfire mitigation and reports and follow-up. And I don't know if that's on here now as a service that the city provides. And I know you did that, an excellent job in going to every residence in the city to make sure that every home was safe from fires. And I assume this is something going forward that would be important to the residents, to make sure that people do upkeep their residence so that that doesn't become an issue in the future, which would be a fee that you would have to charge, would like to charge to recover some of the cost associated with that. So that was one of the questions. And just looking at it from a data perspective, I wonder if this report reflects every service that the city provides, whether or not we recover or charge for the expenses. If it's really hey, this is everything we do for the residents of San Rafael, or if there were, no, there's some things the county does, and it's now really not reflected on here. So there are many other services available to you, though they may not be on this report. So that was some of the thoughts that came up. One other was parking meters. I mean, that's another source of revenue. I know they're very anxious to maintain as many parking spots as possible. And there's okay, and that's my time.
Thank you, Al. Anybody else have any comments on the master fee schedule? Not seeing anyone. We will close the public comment, and there are great questions in there. Streeteries, wildfire mitigation reports and follow-up. Their fees reflect all services by the city. Interesting way of thinking about it. And then parking. And I know that we're funded different ways, so might not all be here, but if you could speak to those.
Right. I'll take a first stab. Let me start with the question of whether this report reflects all of the services the city provides. The answer is absolutely not. And I say that somewhat facetiously. There are a number of programs and services that the city provides that are entirely funded through other funding sources, specifically, tax revenues, grants, and the like. The purpose of the fee schedule and what this report really focuses on is where, consistent with both state law and city ordinances, city council has the ability to establish a fee that is charged to individuals, residents, or businesses that directly benefit from that service, as opposed to the array of services that are provided that provide general public benefit. We do not charge for 911 response and the like, to give you an example. We certainly don't charge for street repairs and all the work that we do in our public works and infrastructures. This is really the programs and services that are offered for residents to take advantage of should they choose to or need to, but is not a general benefit to, nor does it include, like I said, services that are available to residents that are provided by other jurisdictions like the county or some of our special districts. I believe the streeteries or the partlet fees are included in the fee schedule. This was established a while back, right, when the policy was you're basically renting the right of way, and I believe that fee, correct me if I'm wrong, I think was set at about $3,000 per parking space, and there's a process for going through that application. I'll need to go through the fee schedule to find out exactly where it is, but it's basically under the category of rental of public right-of-way. I may also ask again for some assist from our fire folks as it relates to the vegetation management. It's a very extensive focus program funded largely through funds that we receive through Measure C, the Wildfire Prevention Act. But there is associated with that program some penalties and fines for non-compliance more than anything. But Thomas, if you can help out on that one.
I think Director Navasio covered it. We do collect about $4 million from the MWPA, which funds all of the inspections that are done and conducted throughout the city. We do have we do assess fees or fines for non-compliance. But we also have a reinspection fee for any properties that ask for a waiver. They might not be in compliance, but we may allow them to slowly get into compliance, and we have an annual fee for reinspecting those properties.
Thank you. And the last one, and by the way, the street trees is page 11 under DPW, just so you know, it is in there.
Oh, thank you.
The parking, the last question was just about parking and how that ties in to this. And I think you already answered it, but if you could.
Yeah, there is a section in here for, we were just reviewing it with the staff on parking citations, which we're not impacting. I don't have an answer off the top of my head as to, the setting of, how much does a quarter get you at the parking meter? So we may have to get back on that one. But the primary ones on parking are citation related.
Thank you. Thank you. See if there are any additional questions that have arisen from my colleagues. Not seeing anyone, then I'll give you the opportunity to offer some comments before I ask for motion. Vice Mayor Hill, comments?
Thank you, Mayor Kate. Thank you, Director Navasio, and all staff for making this possible. As we contemplate what a master fee schedule update is, I would say on face value to most community members, it has a boring sound to it, but I would want to elevate the significance of what this means to a community member who needs to fit in some of these fees into their regular budget or even a one-off. The numbers on the page have real material impact to a lot of our community members. So what I'd like to bring forth is the thoughtfulness that staff has given to every number on these pages, that there's a recognition that there needs to be granularity as we think about what these numbers mean to our community. So the balance of, in your words, Director Navasio, the sweet spot, I think, is the best place where we've arrived here. I'm going to be voting yes for moving this forward. I do think that we will continue to evaluate and make certain that we're striking the right balance between how we do cost recovery and how we make certain we're delivering our services for public benefit, but also for direct services that are requested by our community. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Urans Gulati.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to echo Vice Mayor Hill and how sometimes this actually adds up, to the budgets. Again, I would like to reiterate, I would love to see the non-residents paying more fees for using our facilities because I think they're really nice and we could. So, and also, as we are talking about climate change, any incentive that we can do around renewable energy, to upgrade any of the appliances, I think it will be, maybe worth to take a look in the future. So, but I really want to thank you there's so much here. So really thank you for looking at every fee and really make it competitive. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Kurtz.
Yes, thank you for all the work around this. And I do appreciate that it's coming back annually or about annually, because it's really hard to swallow an increase in a fee if we haven't updated it in years. And we need to look at how do we recover some of our costs. And we can't bring them all up to 100%, but I do think there's a really conscious, look at what we're doing today and what it really does cost the city. So I appreciate that. Thank you. And I do also want to just thank the community for their support of Measure C. A lot of people, which is the funding that we're getting to actually be able to do those home inspections. So every homeowner is actually contributing to that in one way or another, but the taxes imposed right now around that are very, very much appreciated and allow us to do a lot of work. So thank you.
Thank you. And I agree. This was a huge staff report with lots of attachments and a lot of granularity. So I know all of the departments weighed in on it. And just to reiterate, cost recovery is what we're in the business for. I mean, and there are a couple instances where we went over that. I thought you explained that really well. And that will continue to be our guiding star as we look at these. And we make sure that we're following the state legislation that mandates the legality of what we can raise and what we can't. So I want to just underscore that as well. And I know that the council continues to support having the lower fees around the Alboro Center. You did highlight that. That is a continued program, and I think it represents the values and the support that we want to give to the residents of the Canal neighborhood, as well as people who are using the Alboro Center. And finally, you didn't bring it up, but it always makes me really happy, although I didn't benefit from it. But there's no fees for late library books. Being that my kids are now grown adults, we paid a lot of money when my kids were little. And I just want to reiterate that because that, to me, it really provides the ultimate in accessibility and equity that you don't get charged. I mean, we turn in a book, they'd be like $40. It was crazy. So thank you to the Recreation and Library Department for fixing that years ago, because I think that's really important. I hope all jurisdictions have done that, but I don't think they all have. So we look forward to seeing this again in a year plus, as opposed to, as Councilmember Kurt said, in a couple of years, so we can stay on top of it. And I will entertain a motion on this item, please.
I'm happy to make a motion. Make sure I'm in the right spot. Adopt a resolution authorizing an update to the city's master fee schedule.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Hill,
Aye.
Councilmember Kurtz.
Aye.
Councilmember Yedan Scalati,
Aye.
Mayor Kate.
Aye. That motion carries 4-0. Thank you, Director Navazio. We have another item on our agenda this evening. It's the Greenhouse Gas Emissions Reports and Climate Action Priorities Update. Fueled by the cupcakes we ate during the break, we are ready to hear from you.
Are cupcakes renewable energy?
Yes, they are. They keep us going.
Okay. Share. Make sure you right there we go. Oops, got the wrong one. There we go.
Yep.
Great. Okay. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. This is not an action. There's no council action here tonight. We're going to give you an update on our greenhouse gas inventory and our 2-year sustainability work plan. We're going to start off with a little bit of climate action and state of the climate context. Then Christine will take it over and tell you about our greenhouse gas inventories. This year, we have not only our community greenhouse gas inventory, but our local government inventory as well, which is done every 5 to 7 years. And then we'll wrap it up with the 2-year sustainability priority work plan update. And this is Christine O'Rourke, our sustainability coordinator for the Marine Climate and Energy Partnership. She helped write our climate action plan and all the climate action plans in the county, and also develops all of our greenhouse gas inventories so that we're all consistent and work together. So we start with the bad news. It seems like every time I come to you, there's just worse and worse news on the climate. Hottest year on record last year. This year is challenging it already. Highest number of heat deaths ever, 35% more in 2023 from 2022. And then Canada was just on fire. They set records last year, and our record Western United States fires of 2020 were dwarfed by what happened in Canada in 2023. Sea ice glaciers retreating, not as much extent And then the last one's really important. You know, we talk about climate change often in the environmental context, but it's really about people, living beings that are affected the most. The number of people acutely food insecure doubled in 2023, and some of that was right here in the US. On the upside, renewable electricity increased 50% in 1 year. That's tremendous. We had so much battery storage increase in California over the last several years. You remember the extreme heat waves that we had last year, and we were asked to conserve electricity. We had record heat this year, and there was no ask to conserve electricity, and that's mainly because of all the battery storage and all the renewables that are online now. And that's including a big increase in EV sales and more people plugging in. So the grid has been growing with our need, which is very, very good. And then solar served a new high of almost 85% of the California electricity demand in 2023. That's huge as well. And then locally, some of the exciting things that are happening, this is related to SB 1383, actually. We have 20 carbon farms in West Marin right now with plans to make all of them carbon farms in the next decade. That's where they use compost on rangelands and workable lands to draw down the carbon from the atmosphere, and it's much more impactful than even planting trees. So that's very exciting. So you hear me say this all the time. We have a 40% reduction. Have you ever reduced anything in your life or your business? 40%. It's very challenging. We have 54 measures in the Climate Action Plan. We really focused on, when Mayor Kate was leading the charge for the update, elevating local economy and social equity in our Climate Action Plan. We're heavily focused on the environment, but not as heavily focused on the people and impacts. And so the idea there was really to try to minimize unintended consequences and try to identify and elevate co-benefits whenever possible, making sure people are not left out of the green energy revolution, making sure that we're not adding all kinds of fees or challenges to people to be able to electrify their business, for example. And then we committed to regular updates to the council. Christine will go into this pie chart more. The main reason for this is just to show these are where all the emissions come from. We're talking about community greenhouse gas emissions. It's a global issue, kind of like the economy is a global issue. It's very challenging as a local government to do a lot with that. We have limited control and competing priorities. But overall, our city government operations, all of our staff, all of our facilities, all of our streetlights, all of our lights in our parks, all of our parking garages, all of our employee commute still adds up to less than 1% of our community greenhouse gas emissions, which means if we're not creative and we don't collaborate, we don't meet our goals. So that's the context, and I'll turn it over to Christine to give you an update on our actual emissions inventories.
Great. Thank you, Corey. I'm Christina O'Rourke, Sustainability Coordinator for the Marin Climate and Energy Partnership. Thank you for having me this evening. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'll be presenting both the community-wide and the local government operations inventories for the year 2022. That is the latest year that we have all the data that we need in order to complete these inventories. And this work is provided on behalf of the Marin Climate and Energy Partnership, or MCEP, which is a partnership of all of the Marin cities and towns, the County of Marin, the Transportation Authority Marin, MCE, and Marin Water. We've been working together since 2007 to implement our climate action plans, and one of our major work products are these annual community greenhouse gas emissions inventories. We do them every year. And we do municipal inventories about every 5 years. We did have a little bit of a lag this time around because of COVID. So the inventories that we do are called activity-based inventories, and that's in contrast to a consumption-based inventory. And activity-based is looking at activities that occur within the San Rafael boundary. And we do that, first of all, it's protocol compliant, but it also helps the city to focus on the activities that they really have more control over. And this is also where we have data that's pretty reliable, and we can quantify the data and we can look at changes from year to year. A consumption-based inventory is looking at all of the life cycle emissions. So that's going to include emissions from mining, growing, producing, packaging, shipping products and food, also air travel. So we're not including that. The activity-based inventory in 2022 shows that every household produces about 14 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. That is in comparison to a consumption-based inventory. There was one done by the Bay Area Air Quality Management District back in 2016, and they did that for all of the communities in the Bay Area. That was using 2013 data. So that consumption-based inventory shows 44 metric tons per household. That's probably lower. That's about 10 years, that data. But so we're actually capturing somewhere between probably a third and a half of the actual consumption-based inventories in the way that we do our activity-based inventories. So let's take a look at the community emissions first. This is the emissions by sector. The largest sector is the transportation sector. About 2/3 of emissions comes from transportation. In this sector, we are including emissions from passenger vehicles, and we look at something called VMT, vehicle miles traveled, and we're looking at trips that either start and or end in San Rafael, which basically means that we're excluding any trips that are just pass-through trips. We're also including a portion of the commercial vehicle miles traveled in Marin County, and we allocate that to San Rafael based on particular types of jobs. And also we are including buses that travel on local roads. The second largest sector here comes from the consumption of natural gas in the built environment. So that's including residential and commercial buildings. That's about 1/4 of emissions. The use of electricity in the built environment is only 6% of the pie. That used to be much larger, but our electricity has been getting cleaner over the years as we're adding more renewable electricity to the power mix. And then we have the waste sector, which is only at 3% of emissions. These emissions come from the decomposition of organic material in the landfill that creates a very potent greenhouse gas called methane, and some of that escapes into the atmosphere. And then the other sectors are quite relatively smaller. Water, off-road, and wastewater are all about 1 or less than 1% of emissions. This is a look at emissions over time. We have been doing inventories and calculating emissions. We have all the data we need going back to 2005. So for 1990, we are estimating emissions at 15% below the 2005 level. And that is, that's a guideline that is provided by the California Air Resources Board to local governments. So emissions are in 2022, we're 22% below the 1990 level. And as Corey said earlier, the goal, San Rafael's goal in the Climate Change Action Plan is to be at 40% below 1990 levels by 2030. So we're making good progress. If you look at the trajectory if we started 2009, when the city first adopted its first climate action plan and kind of draw a trend line, you would get just about to the 2030 goal in the next 8 years. So that's good news. I guess the one thing to keep in mind is that some of those earlier gains were really accomplished through MCE and what's happened to electricity. So it's going to get a little bit more challenging as we continue to reduce emissions. This is just some highlights that come from the report that's provided to you. Electricity emissions are down 85%, and that's due to the lower carbon intensity of electricity. That really started with MCE, but both MCE and PG&E are now at 95% in greenhouse gas emissions free. The natural gas emissions are down 14% since 2005. And that could be due to a combination of factors. Really, the variability in the weather plays a large factor here. As the climate warms, though, we're using less natural gas to heat homes at night. But some of this could also be due to improvements in efficiency of homes and buildings, and also to some fuel switching, which is really just starting to happen. And that's switching from natural gas appliances and heating systems to ones that use electricity. Vehicle miles traveled are down 14% since 2005, and transportation emissions are down 22%. So that's due to both a combination of the lower VMT plus better fuel efficiency of the vehicles that are on the road, and also more zero-emission vehicles, which are battery electric and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. In 2022, 7.5% of all passenger vehicles registered in Marin County were zero emission vehicles, a little bit lower in San Rafael at 5.8%. Excuse me. Moving on to the waste sector, waste disposal in landfills is down 22% since 2005, and waste emissions are down almost half. And that's due, again, to a combination of both the decrease in the landfill material and also a lower organic content of the landfilled waste. So we are beginning to get people and businesses to take organic material out of their waste stream. So this is a comparison of how we're doing compared to what the cap was targeting. So if we look at electricity use and emissions in the built environment, emissions, as I said, are down 86% since 2022. I think I actually said 85%. That might be a rounding error. And the cap is targeting a 93% reduction in electricity emissions. So we're very close to actually hitting that target. Natural gas in the built environment, we're down 14% since 2005, and the cap is targeting a 28% reduction. So over the next 8 years, we pretty much have our work cut out for us there. In transportation, similarly, we're about halfway where we are hoping to be. And waste, we're about 3/4 of the way of where we need to get. So really, also in consideration of how much larger the built environment, natural gas, and the transportation sectors are, really the best opportunity to significantly reduce emissions and meet our 2030 target is to electrify everything. Electrify vehicles, hot water heaters, heating systems, and appliances. And just another data point, which I think helps to, when we're looking at the transportation sector, this is the EV data for passenger vehicles at the end of 2023. So I was just telling you about 2022 data. 2023 data is available. Countywide, we're now at 9%, and we were a year prior to that at 7.5%. San Rafael is at 7%. So we are making really good progress with zero emission vehicle adoption. In fact, if you kind of continue the trajectory that we're on, I think we'll be able to meet the San Rafael target, which is 25% of vehicles registered in Marin County will be zero emission vehicles by 2030. So we really are kind of on our way. That's being helped, of course, by just the market in general, a lot more zero emission vehicles on the market. When you look at new sales, about 40% of new vehicle registrations in Marin County are zero emission vehicles, which is actually pretty amazing. Okay, moving on to the municipal emissions inventory. First of all, I just want to mention that this inventory is less than 1% of the community-wide emissions. Important thing to remember. The largest sector of municipal emissions, it comes from the employee commute sector. That's over 1/3. Here we're looking at VMT, vehicle miles traveled by employees when they're coming and going back to work, back and forth to work. And we're counting 1/2 of that, of those trips, the mileage of those trips. The second largest sector is the vehicle fleet sector. This would include public works trucks, police vehicles, fire department trucks. The next sector is the waste sector at 22%. This includes all the waste generated in all of the city-owned buildings and facilities, also all of the city cans and waste that's collected by the Public Works Department. And then finally, the buildings and facilities sector at 16%. Because the city purchases deep green electricity, this just represents natural gas consumption. And then this looks at how the changes in by all the different sources of emissions. The line at the bottom, I want to draw your attention to that first. There's a 40% reduction in emissions from municipal operations since 2005. Most of that has happened because of, again, the electricity use. Electricity use, I believe, was down, but just because the city is purchasing deep green, that's a big change. The gasoline and diesel emissions and consumption are also down. The diesel emissions are also benefiting from the fact that Public Works, everyone is using now renewable diesel, which has a lower carbon content than regular diesel.
And then solid waste is down 17%. So I think with that, we're going to stop now, and I can answer any questions that you might have about what I just presented before we move on to the next part.
Yeah, we're about halfway through. We don't have time. We are not able to deliberate, so we have to wait for public comment for that, but we can ask any questions. We figured a lot of data, maybe you might have some questions partway through and not wait till the end.
Thank you. Excellent idea. Vice Mayor Hill.
I'll wait.
Oh, okay. Councilmember Kurtz.
I want to see this.
Okay. Councilmember Urans-Galati.
Yes, so a quick question. In the last slide, I saw that the natural gas actually increased. So I was just curious to see where you saw that increase.
Where we think that increase came from, we looked at that last time we did a greenhouse gas inventory. Why did that go up so much? And what we think would happen was when we did the original inventory prior to my time, our library was not in the library building. It had moved at that point for remodeling, and there was no gas being used. And so we actually missed natural gas use from when it was down a few blocks down on East Street. So that's the only thing we could come up with. We scoured it all back in 2015, 2016, trying to figure out what happened. We talked to PG&E and our marine energy management team, and we think that's what happened. So we have actually a little bit of a skewed data point for natural gas for our facilities from 2005.
Great. Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And I realize this might go into the goals, but it's relevant to the data that you just produced. I have a couple questions. So on the EV acceleration, because that was one thing we talked about. I mean, you had a whole ZEV adaptation rate or adoption rate. In terms of infrastructure, we can urge a certain amount through public infrastructure, but I'm curious about private investment. And if you prefer to answer it in the context after the goals and objectives, but I'm just, as you're going around talking to people, I'm curious how the private sector is coming into that whole infrastructure piece, the charging piece, the component to help spur more EV purchases.
Yeah. What I would say is, with the work that I've been doing with all the cities and towns around Marin, some of the biggest ZEV adoption rates that you see, of course, are in places like Belvedere and Ross, and they're the more affluent communities because they can afford to buy ZEVs. Those communities also have maybe 2 EV chargers. Most of those that charging is being done privately, and people who have single-family homes have the ability to install a charger. And so that's what we're seeing is really happening with at least the single family homes. The multifamily homes really need, for the most part, are charging more at publicly accessible chargers.
And I'll just add, it's a great point, and it's something that we've been talking as the sustainability coordinators around the county in the past couple of months about, and we're going to be meeting with TAM soon about the electric vehicle acceleration strategy and how can we actually implement that going forward. If we need more workforce charging, we're actually not the experts in that, it's the private sector. And so if anybody's going to be incentivized to actually get chargers in the right places, it's going to be people that are going to be making money off of it. So we need to figure out our plan moving forward and really tap into the private market. Plus, I don't know that as we deal with it, we really have the staff time, ability, knowledge to be able to be the ones that are running these chargers for public. So more to come.
Right. No, absolutely. I don't think we do have the capacity. It does have to be Marin County-wide. Additional question. So you're talking about the way forward is through building electrification. And yet when we had our REACH code for all new constructions, no natural gas, and it has legal implications or lawsuits around that. So I'm just curious how we then get at those goals when there's a lawsuit part. So we can have all the aspirations in the world. We did that. We made that decision here on the dais, but we weren't able to implement it.
Yes. Well, I mean, there are other things that are happening regionally and around the state which will help. So first of all, the building code, even though we can't do all electric buildings, it does have standards that essentially require either the heating system or the hot water heater has to be electric, a high efficiency electric appliance or system. So that is very helpful with new construction. There are also the Bay Area Air Quality Management District has a new regulations that is it's not going to be possible to buy a gas-fired hot water heater in 2027 for residential buildings or heating systems in 2029. So that will also start to kind of bend that curve. And this is another example is the California Air Resources Board, and this is about small off-road engines and landscape equipment, stationary generators. As of 2024, there cannot be a newly manufactured small off-road engine that uses gasoline. So, a lot of this, what's happening at the state level and regionally is going to help, even though the city cannot implement an all-electric ban at this point.
Do you, in any of your work, Christina, are you factoring what you just said into future numbers?
Oh, absolutely. In the climate action plans I've been working on, we have been, integrating that.
And then the last question is, there's been concern about displacement of folks. So if you're in a multi-unit building, and a landlord chooses to upgrade it and then passes along that cost to renters who are already rent burdened, there's a real danger about additional displacement, like an unintended consequence. Has that come up in your discussions, and who would be the ones supporting those? I don't know if it's MCE, I don't know who it is. Has that been talked about?
Yeah, matter of fact, the building electrification plan the county's been working on has a whole equity section to it. And I haven't been paying attention the past few months. It's been out for public comment in other agencies and things like that. But that's definitely something that lots of jurisdictions are working on and people are trying to solve for. I will say that most of the requirements that we have are not for multifamily, for retrofits. So it's not something that we're putting people in that position, but if they choose to make that choice for their apartment complex, then there are some incentives out there, and we try to help steer people to that. In the end, again, it's not something that we're requiring, though we don't have that as a requirement. And what Christine was referring to is for new construction. So,
right, no, absolutely, and it's both new and the retrofits. But if people want to continue to do their part. No, it's really helpful. And I'm so glad that you're working Marin County wide. I mean, it's too big of a lift for just the city to do that.
Yes.
Not seeing any additional questions. Now we'll let you keep going. Thank you. I'm sure we'll have more.
Great. So this is our 2-year priority work plan update. And again, we set 2-year priorities, and this is halfway through. So we're going to give you an update on what's been happening. We have 11 action items. And if you say 5 are completed and 9 are in progress, that equals 14. You may be wondering what's going on. And that's because they're really buckets. They're areas that we're working on. And there's some things that are completed, like plans or adoption of ordinances, but the actual implementation hasn't started yet. So the first one is to integrate climate action in department goals and projects. That's been progressing slow and steady, and lots of departments are integrating it. For instance, Public Works is integrating climate action activities into the CIP process. We're working on fleet policy and transition across all departments. Digital services is helping with data gathering. Economic development's working with us with our low carbon economy plan and making sure that green business information is getting out to new businesses and entrepreneurs. We're working with finance department to look for new funding sources, and we just adopted our procurement policies and surplus equipment policies. So that's definitely starting to happen, and we feel like between now and the end of the this fiscal year, we should be able to complete that and have, it'll become an ongoing thing, but there's a lot of activity, so it's in progress. SB 1383, which I know you've all had a lot of concern about, a climate pollutant law, which is a lot of people just think about the composting law, but as we've talked about, it's much bigger than that because there's huge procurement requirements, there's huge data and reporting requirements. There's a lot of outreach that needs to happen, including enforcement. And if we don't do enforcement right, we get enforced upon ourselves. So we've done a lot in terms of internal, getting our own house in order. Our last climate fellow developed some web pages for us, including this cool video about, people still don't understand what composts and what recycles. So there's a great video on our employees' website as well. And she helped put together our procurement policies to make sure we meet the law in terms of all of our paper products as well. The most important and exciting thing, and this is what the one piece that was accomplished, was our Zero Waste Marin MOU, which has them taking over the vast majority of the enforcement, the vast majority of procurement of all that compost and mulch that's going out to West Marin and creating carbon farms and going on to wineries and things like that. It's going to get more challenging next year when the amounts we have to purchase bump up. And we will have to be a little bit more involved, but they've taken on a big piece of that, which is fantastic. And that's why the MOU is complete. Our implementation is in progress. And right now we're actually in compliance review with CalRecycle. So we should be expecting them any day now. Exploring a climate resilience district, the whole idea there is we have mitigation, we have adaptation, we have very little funding, the resources are small. Adaptation is going to take a lot of funding. And so we need to be thinking about what's our bedrock, what's our foundation to fundraise from. And so Paul in finance and I have been meeting with different folks. We co-hosted a Bay Area Climate Adaptation Network fundraising panel or financing panel for how do you fund these things that are 500 times more expensive than the grants that we're getting for our planning projects. And MCF has actually offered that we can meet with one of their consultants from Washington, D.C. to learn more about that and to really put together what is our portfolio of funding options for the long term. So this is in progress. Adopted and implement an electric vehicle strategy work plan. You all adopted our strategy and work plan last year, so that's why that is complete. And now we're working on the implementation, and our first order of business really has been lately looking at our own facilities, the infrastructure upgrades that need to happen in order for us to transition our fleet. We can be looking at public parking as well at the same time. But the most important thing is the infrastructure lift is huge and it's very expensive, and we need to do it to meet state law. So we're working on that right now and trying to make use of all the incentives and technical assistance that's out there right now before it goes away. So the planning is complete and the implementation is in progress. Promoting building energy efficiency and electrification. So to your point, Mayor Kate, there's this whole early adopter piece too, right? And so how do we make it as easy as possible for people? So we developed this 8-step guide to electrify your home, which was in conjunction with 2 of our wonderful volunteers, Lucy Reed and Pam Reeves, who have both electrified their homes. And we helped put together this guide, which takes away that first level barrier of how do I even start? What are the things I need to think about? And then people can get into it and go from there. And so Marin Builders put this in their home guide. It's used by the county now on their one-stop shop website. Other jurisdictions have used it around the state as well. So our code adoption for existing buildings is done. The year before we did new buildings, and implementation is in progress, to your point about streamlining, making it easier, looking at ways to reduce other burdens like costs. This one's my favorite project, develop equitable low carbon economy work plan and begin implementation. Similarly, we were looking at, okay, so everybody says green job. What does that mean? What does that mean in San Rafael? Is that anything like a green job in Denver? And so what does that really look like here in San Rafael, small San Rafael and small Marin County? And what is a green business and how do we support current green businesses and how do we identify new entrepreneurs that want to come into this space and then provide them with all the assistance that we can possibly provide. And so we did a lot of engagements, a lot of interviews. We met with people. We met with a lot of job seekers as well. Did a lot of data gathering and then put together this work plan. And so we've got 5 priority work plan items coming out of it, one of which on Friday we will submit a $700,000 grant request with the City of Oakland, Lime Foundation, Canal Alliance, the West Oakland Jobs Resource Center, and one more entity. But the big piece is it would fund a learning cohort and pilot here in San Rafael with all of our car dealerships and repair shops all along the edge of the canal and all of our residents. Right now, they're having a hard time getting good employees. Most of them are good wage and good quality jobs with good benefits, and people are coming in from outside of the county to work them. So how do we turn it into some kind of good workforce development opportunity right here in San Rafael? So the work plan is complete. Implementation is in progress. This one, I won't spoil the surprise. We'll be back next month or early November with our legal dumping recommendations, but we have 5 years of pilots under our belt. We have some good recommendations to bring forward to you. And, lots of little benefits along the way, like new trash cans that are really good and keep all the rain out and the crows and all that good stuff. So pilot programs are complete, recommendations in progress. We should be bringing that back to you soon. And then completing our sea level rise feasibility study. So this is a big project that's funded from Marin Community Foundation, the State Office of Planning and Research, and the Coastal Conservancy. We have about $1.5 million to really do a feasibility study and what can be done to actually protect people in East San Rafael and throughout downtown from sea level rise, with a priority on trying to get a leadership group from the Canal neighborhood to really be able to engage in the long term. And also to be thinking about what are the policies in place, to your point about displacement. What are the other things that need to be in place so we really are protecting people that are living here now? Or otherwise, who are we protecting for? So this winter and spring, we'll progress to prioritizing next steps. We'll start to integrate that into the PDA study next year. And then ultimately, it's going to require hundreds of millions of dollars to make some of these changes. So this is in progress. This is the one that is on hold. So developing a citywide climate resilience plan was really meant to be all hazards, looking at extreme heat and all sorts of other things. But what we're finding is that the sea level rise issue is really big here. Could be very expensive. So much of our area is anywhere from 2 to 5 or 6 feet below current high tide. And we have a very tenuous edge. A lot of it is private property. A lot of it is not necessarily engineered for this kind of sea level rise that's coming. And so we're putting on hold the whole climate resilience plan effort. We have a local hazard mitigation plan. There's already a wildfire protection action plan. So the biggest climate threats, that and sea level rise, we're focusing more on sea level rise and getting that plan together because number 10, we're trying to implement and respond to state laws. And as Mayor Kate mentioned earlier on, the regional shoreline adaptation planning process is beginning. There's a lot of requirements. It's a wonderful start. It's got everything under the hood and maybe too much. And we need to figure that piece out because it's going to be a big burden for the city to be able to do that. So we need to focus on that sea level rise. So that's what we're proposing at this point, is to put on hold that and focus more on that. And our other state laws, all these new laws coming down from the state regarding single-use packaging and plastics and trying to reduce them, we have to respond to that. The advanced clean fleets, I was mentioning that we have to transition our fleet over the next several years. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars probably to do that. Pretty stringent regulations that are frankly maybe not actually achievable, but we want to do the best we can. And then, the state is continuing to put in robust new green building codes. And so we may or may not need to continue to reach codes, looking at how aggressive the state is implementing new codes. So we have to respond to that and make sure that our code enforcement officials know how to do it and continually look for those ways to streamline and make it easier for people to actually meet the code. So these are all ongoing. And that was just a smattering of the state laws that we respond to. The last one is Reimagine the Volunteer Program. And I think between now and the end of the year, we'll have some resolution of that. We do need and do continue to help with things like Earth Day and Coastal Cleanup Day, which is this Saturday. But that's in progress, and we're working on what that staffing level looks like and how we can reimagine the volunteer program. So that's it. And to recap, we have a big goal. We're at 22% right now. Most of the low-hanging fruit's been picked. So we're working on some of those bigger areas. And so I just circled these 3 because all the grants and all the planning processes and all the things that are happening are either EVs or chargers or solar or battery backup or renewable energy or energy efficiency, reach codes, but they're not really integrated very well yet. And that's kind of the next step that I'm kind of seeing and think that's going to happen, is that integration of all these things electric. How do we build out a grid that works for it? How do we build out local renewables and make sure that we're thinking through strategically? It's kind of that go slow to go fast that I think needs to happen, as well as, and this is not something that we're going to be able to calculate for our greenhouse gas inventory, but that sequestration piece is big. So if we're thinking about consumption, we're thinking about the actual greenhouse gas emissions and actually getting to reduce the impacts of climate change, we really need to focus on sequestration and ways to draw that carbon out of the atmosphere. So that's it. And this last slide just has a smattering of some of our collaborators and partners, and we can't do it without all these folks. It is amazing the amount of collaboration that happens in this county and around the Bay Area. And so forgive me if I left anybody off, but just wanted to get as many up there just to see these are our partners. These are the people that we rely on to make some of this happen. So, thank you.
Thank you. Comprehensive as always. So thank you. And I'll see if there are any additional questions at this point. Yes, before we turn to the public. Go ahead, Vice Mayor Hill.
Thank you, Mayor Kate. you went by it really quickly, and I'm going to go backwards in terms of where my notes are. You said to get to a clean fleet, you said hundreds of millions of dollars. Are you talking just about if you were to push a button and replace the entire fleet for the city of San Rafael, that it would be hundreds of millions, or is
Not just for the city of San Rafael. We're also working with Marin Sanitary. We're working with, all the folks on the corridor, the Anderson corridor, trying to figure out how do we, because if we all go about it individually, we're all going to be pinging PG&E for upgrades and there's no coordination. And by the way, can we share some of these resources? So and that's that whole go slow to go fast again too. It's going to take quite a bit of planning, but it doesn't make sense for us all to go alone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then going back, because I reserved my questions, I contemplated the same slide that you did when I saw the adoption of EVs against the communities, and it was clear there was a correlation there's a proportionality to affluence that I think I would note. So I continue to be interested in our EV strategy and how that shows up in our community, what beyond just what we might legislate, who we engage with in our upper electeds, to make certain that once we understand what that need is, how much we need to be asking for and what we ask for. I know we did not get into detail tonight, but just to bring it forward again, there's different degrees of what EV ready can mean for communities or community members who live in multi-family buildings that don't necessarily have immediate access. I mean, that's a huge factor. A single family home is very convenient to plug in a vehicle, not so much if you're in a multifamily where if there's not adequate parking inside of a building, then you're parking wherever you possibly can nearby. So that's certainly a barrier that I'm interested in. And I know this is, again, not something we're contemplating tonight. I am curious because we don't talk about the full life cycle of waste, and we don't talk about the full impacts of someone getting onto a plane and traveling. And this is a behavior that many of us engage in regularly. Beyond just, this is probably outside of the scope of the discussion, but if you had to make a comment to what behavior change could do to overall connecting it to where our climate is heading as a globe, what advice would you give to our community if they wanted to make impacts in ways that are not being contemplated today?
Okay, so first of all, let me start off by talking about Resilient Neighborhoods, which is, our really prime community outreach and education program. And they do look at life cycle emissions and make recommendations about what else you can do to reduce your entire carbon footprint. And they look at, they calculate emissions from air travel, for example. I think that the biggest impact that you could make is from what, without having actual numbers, air travel, certainly reducing your air travel, reducing consumption in general. The less you buy and the less you waste, all of those upstream emissions are avoided. So reducing consumption. And that can also just impact, when you go grocery shopping, buying exactly what you need so you don't waste food as well. And the other thing, of course, that I've heard is not eating as much meat, because meat, have all the crops that have to be grown in order to support livestock have big consequences to the environment.
Thank you for saying so. I think that's correct. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Kurtz, questions?
Thank you. I wanted to focus a little bit on the transportation aspect and the employee commuter. I was trying to dig through a little bit on your side in terms of trying to break that down a bit. I'm not sure if that's there. In our plan, in the city's plan, we had an update around the trip reduction ordinance. I don't recall that, so I apologize if that's out there. Can you provide a little bit more information and update around that? And if we were going to look at doing something around that, what would it be?
I cannot remember. I'm hoping, Christine, you know more about it. There was some state legislation that required one of, it was like one of a handful of things that any new development needed to do to try to achieve some trip reduction. Bicycle parking, there were a handful of different things. One of them was to offer an employee commute program depending. So it was for, I think it was business 50 or more. My memory is pretty bad. That was a few years ago or several years ago now. So if you're speaking of in the public or are you speaking more for employee commute?
Well, this one says update the city's trip reduction ordinance to reflect the most BAA-QMD, Bay Area Quality Management District, regulations to increase the number of employers subject to the ordinance.
Yeah, what Corey was saying is that regulation was revised years ago. And so it does now impact any employer who has 50 or more employees, and that's anywhere. They don't have to all be in San Rafael, and they're required to provide, and there's a host of different things that they can take in order to encourage trip reduction. So there are things that the city can do to partner with the air quality district because it's their regulation, but they have a list of who is compliant and who's not and who's updating their records with the air district. And so the city can work with them to reach out to those non-compliant businesses.
So that might be one tool in our toolbox that we can look at potentially. To look at that. And then my other question is around, has there, not for us to do, because I don't know if we would be able to do this, but have you seen or started to see any data or correlation between increased workforce housing and reduction of transportation emissions?
Well, there certainly are, there are methodology around that so that when you're doing like a climate action plan, you can take reductions from, expected VMT, vehicles, miles traveled, from workforce housing, from affordable housing as well. So there's a lot of studies that have been done and kind of reinforce what you're saying is that those households travel a lot less in general, or they also take alternative transportation, use alternative transportation, so they have lower VMT emissions.
Right, because I'm thinking within San Rafael, we don't have that many businesses that would have over 50 employees, but we do have a lot of people traveling into the city to work.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilmember Lorraine Scolari.
Thank you. Just a quick question. When you're looking at within transportation buses, are you calculating the value based on the buses that they stop in San Rafael, like they leave so like if there is a bus that starts in Novato but it stops in San Rafael, are you counting those or just the ones that they start and they finish in San Rafael? Just curious.
Yeah, Marin Transit and Golden Gate Transit are able to provide what they call revenue miles that are driven in San Rafael. So it's when the bus is driving through San Rafael. So it may or may not be stopping. It could be that, it's just going on 101 through San Rafael.
Okay, so
I don't know how many routes do that actually.
Yeah, but so that's the only one that we are doing it with buses. If it's like trucks, for example, that's different.
Trucks we have a data for countywide truck VMT. And so we allocate that to all of the jurisdictions, and it's based on, it's a protocol. It's based on basically truck trip generating industries.
Okay.
And so that is a portion, and it's more of a rough estimate.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Oh, one more question. Sorry. So you were talking about like the new registrations for new EV cars. Are you also calculating when they have like an old car, when it goes off, when it's sold, or how do you calculate those cars?
Right. So the data is calculated by the California Energy Commission, and they partner with the Department of Motor Vehicles to get the data. So they're looking at registrations. So they look at the type of car and the year of the car. And then when they're looking at new, like if they're calculating sales, they're looking at when that model year of the car, and they go back a little bit in case the model year is not the actual year.
I see. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. I just have one more question, really building on what Vice Mayor Hill was talking about in terms of consumption and personal choices. So a lot of this is changing, and you said that, Christine, like can you reduce it? Oh, you consume less. So that's changing human behavior. So my question to you is this: I don't see a goal and objective around that. So is it embedded? Are you trying to get at it by embedding it within each of those? Because obviously that's the ginormous elephant in the room. So I would love to hear what the strategies are about that when I don't see it called out specifically.
Right. So supporting resilient neighborhoods is the main one. And what we did, a few years ago is really pitch that as like, they are our main delivery system for behavior change, and they do it better than anybody anywhere. And so we need to support them. It's through MCEP, and all the cities and towns contribute a little extra to MCEP to be able to help fund part of resilient neighborhoods. But they do it the best. There are lots of other things out there. For instance, MMWD does a lot around water savings, right? But they handle that. They're in charge of water savings. So we can help promote that and elevate those types of campaigns. We don't have anything specific to it, but I appreciate the question because it goes back to the last couple of comments from Councilmembers Hill and Kurtz. And then another thing that people can do is really reduce their trips. And it's possible for most people to reduce your commute 1 day a week. That's 20% of your commute that you can reduce by 1 day a week, planning adequately and combining your trips, getting somebody, carpooling with somebody. There's definitely room for campaigns like that for sure. There's plenty of information out there on electric vehicles already. There's lots of interest out there. The industry's doing well, but something like this is not really talked about that much, and really is better for all of us to drive less. So there's definitely potential for something like that. It's not baked into our current priorities, but it's certainly something that we want to look at for the future.
And that's a great example because that is a big reduction over a small behavior change. And you think about the fact that we all bring reusable bags to the grocery store when that first started. Granted, the time took a while, but I'm curious. I think it's a really interesting idea. If there's campaigns that are throughout Marin or even California and that's probably less controversial than don't eat meat, right? That's a whole other, people get sometimes that.
But as you know, too, behavior change is really less about campaigns and more about finding ways to remove the barriers that get in people's way, right? And so that's why the 1 day a week actually does sort of address that. And that, if you've got to get your kids to soccer, you got to do all these other things, it's pretty hard to take the bus or ride your bike. But if you can strategize 1 day a week, it's usually something.
Oh, that'll be something interesting for us to talk to the other jurisdictions about, because I can see, I don't know, a campaign, it is a word as a campaign, but just having people start to think about it. Because sometimes I think people are so daunted, like, oh, I can't reduce anything 40%, to your point, but that's very much a step you can take. That's a great example. Thank you, Corey. So there might be other questions that we hear from the public, definitely input. And I know that I see Bill Carney's here. We did get your letter, but we'd love to hear from you if you're so inclined. And of course, we also got a letter from Warren Wells of MCBC. I just want to acknowledge that we did read those. But I will open up public comment for additional questions and or input.
Good evening, everybody. Bill Carney. I'm Vice President of Sustainable San Rafael. We totally agree with the staff report and staff that San Rafael needs to redouble its efforts to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that are driving climate change. The inventory tonight shows that San Rafael must reduce greenhouse gas emissions by about an additional 77,000 tons in less than a decade. In order to reach our 2030 goal of 40% fewer emissions than the baseline year of 1990. Clearly, the place to seek additional reductions is from the two largest emissions, sources of emissions, cars and buildings. The city's approved EV acceleration strategy and upcoming countywide building electrification roadmap provide a menu of effective actions. In particular, to promote rapid adoption of emission-free cars, we urge the city to support multiple ride and drive events each year, supported by expanded EV charging infrastructure in public facilities and in priority communities. To promote the rapid transition from gas building appliances to greenhouse gas-free heat pump water heaters and furnaces, we again urge early promotion and public education backed up by strong reach codes and financial incentives. Finally, to the extent that such stepped-up actions require additional funding, we urge you to fund them. Given the need to redouble our efforts for the remainder of this decade, we recommend that future climate action and budget priorities include quantitative measures for achieving the greenhouse gas reductions needed each year to achieve those 2030 goals. And I also want to thank you, and I also want to, thank staff for a really great summary and for a really great inventory. And look forward to that quantitative skill that you bring to this really being applied year by year as we move towards this difficult target. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for being a partner in this through Sustainable San Rafael.
Mayor and council members, I'm Howard Schwartz and I live in the San Rafael Highlands and I'm co-chair of Sustainable San Rafael. I'll be honest, I really hate speaking in public and coming to these meetings. The fact that I'm here is because I care so deeply about responding to the climate crisis. I know the crisis is much bigger than us here, and sometimes it feels like such a big lift for each of us to take steps to reduce our emissions. I think a lot about my consumption in the US and in the Bay Area. Just being an American has made my consumption way bigger than most people's. And I try hard to bring that down. I put in a heat pump. I'm cooking with an induction plate for the most part, and I'm shopping for my EV. And I find my inspiration in the city's earlier efforts to reduce carbon and in other individuals around Marin who've made similar efforts. I know the city has many priorities, but I urge you to reach into your hearts and dig deep on this one. If we living in Marin can't reach our 2030 goals, who can? I want to specifically encourage you to look for new ways to drive electrification in our buildings in San Rafael. As you know, the big chunk of greenhouse gas emissions comes from heating our buildings. And Berkeley, as you know, its first attempt got shut down, but they're at it again. And let's follow their lead and look for creative ways to push forward. Individuals need inspiration from the city to lead the way, even if it is only 1% of our consumption. I think it inspires a lot of us to drive down, to answer some of those things you were raising about campaigns. So if we can show we're headed to our 2030 goals, we can inspire the other cities locally and elsewhere. They can do the same. My friends and others I talk to want to know what they can do. And I think only by the city leading, that'll inspire them. Thank you very much for everything you do and keep at it.
Thank you. Thank you, Howard. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Kate and City Council. My name is Jack Wilkinson. I've lived in San Rafael since 1976. Lovely town, love it here. I love the report you people put out. I think it's really interesting. I'm a little curious, though, about how much money is being spent on doing this. When I look at, we've got roughly, 256,000 people in the county, and San Rafael represents about, about 20% of the county. And the county represents about 0.8% of the state. And the state represents about 0.5% of the world. So we're kind of carrying a squirt gun to a major forest fire. We can reduce it all, and I think it's wonderful that we try. But I'm a little concerned with the immediacy of the problem that we have, which I envision as both an eyesore and an attack on the culture in the city, and that's the homeless problem. How much money and time is being spent on that? And it hasn't been changed in the last 10 years. It only seems to get worse. But when I drive to my city hall and I see tents all around it, that exemplifies the problem. It's not being solved. You make great efforts on carbon emissions, but we've got a real problem. I want to see some of the money spent there, or at least an equal amount, on solving the problem of the eyesore and the homeless people invading our streets. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I'm sorry you weren't at a meeting 2 meetings ago. We had an entire city council update on all the things we're doing. So if you email me, I will send you the link as well as the link to the homepage. Success is hard to see on homelessness. Welcome, Al.
How are you, Mayor Kate?
Go ahead with your comments.
Okay. Just reacting. More clarifications, and as a bit of humor, I was listening to an emissions presentation, and all of a sudden somebody went into hyperdrive and gave me like 13 other projects, and it was like, I can't take all that information. So I'm only looking at emissions. I know you work on a lot of stuff. One question had to do with a pie chart that showed 3% of methane gas, I think, was coming out, or waste gas. And I didn't know if that 3% was like, this is the worst kind of gas that could come out, that really produces a lot of greenhouse. And even though it looks like 3%, it really represents a larger percentage. So I was just trying to get an understanding of what that 3% represented. Also, maybe it's terminology, but I remember recently hearing something about food waste being a major issue in climate change and greenhouse emissions. And I saw something called solid waste on your report. I didn't know if these were the same thing, or food waste is another category, and that really does represent a large percentage of where greenhouse gases come from. And we're not dealing with that right now because there's no time, or there's another agency that deals with that. So that's kind of the question. The other one is a lot of times, and I don't know if this is related to what's going on, what we heard earlier, but government, or some agency says, go do this thing, and they do it because they're really good and they got a lot of money and they can get it done. And they forget that they're affecting other things. And the other thing that they may be affecting is land use. So we're building all these solar collectors, and we're wasting a bunch of land, and now all these solar collectors are sitting there. And the question or a suggestion is there any way we can lift those solar collectors up and leave the ground underneath open so people can use it? So that was more of a suggestion than a question, so you could take it or do whatever you want with it. And the last one had to do with the city saying, well, we don't really want to get into the e-charger business because we're really not good at that. My suggestion or a question about that, is it possible for the city to say, hey, we don't want to get into that, but we'll give you a little piece of land, and if we can let you build on this, you got to build chargers, and maybe you can get
Thank you,
that done there. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to comment on the greenhouse gas emission report?
Shinji Sakayage, McGinnis Golf Course. Thank you for the presentation and your efforts. It sounded like the transportation portion, the effects of transportation didn't include people who pass through the city of San Rafael. So I think it's, maybe it's not possible to get that included or whatnot, but I just think about all these cars that pass through here. And as a former commuter to the city from San Anselmo, it's, all these people from Sonoma County to the city. We have Highway 37, obviously, and then with the Richmond San Rafael Bridge, you're gonna take away a bike lane. You gotta have more cars coming from the East Bay to bypass the Bay Bridge, getting into the city. I think it's important to try and get that picture if possible. I like your idea, Mayor Kate, of the reduction. My opinion, it's like we could reinvent the wheel. We could spend all this money and infrastructure and things like that. But it's like, do we even have the money for that and that kind of thing? So can we just use the existing foundation that we have, maybe make a campaign, make buses free, make Smart Train free for everybody? It's free for so many people, right? I think about the pandemic and, going for bike rides at Mount Tam, and there was nobody out, right? The baby deer were prancing through the road kind of thing. It was so quiet kind of thing. Is there another way where we can make times like that I think we all felt the difference in our lungs and the good air quality during that time. Also, people are working remotely, at least 2, 3, 4 days a week. I mean, I think a lot of that foundation is there. I mean, what are people driving for if you're not driving for work, right? I mean, can you shop locally? Can you go to your local grocery store? Do we all have to go to Costco? You know, that kind of thing. So thank you for your efforts. I think working with what we have might be something that we want to include in that vision. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Not seeing anyone else who would like to comment on the greenhouse gas emission report. I'll bring it back. And I heard a couple questions in there, lots of good input. One was just around the budget to support goals, because I think that has been a conversation internally. If you could speak to that, food waste emissions, and then EV charger land, plots of land. I don't know if I'm curious if that would be successful or not. I'm just curious. I mean, we want to think creatively, so.
Right. So our budget is for sustainability is really small compared to homeless budget. However, we're also, we try to be nimble and try to secure grants whenever we can. And so, for instance, the Sea Level Rise project, again, is 1.5 million. It affects a lot of people currently housed that we don't want to become homeless too, right? And I know you all have spoken so much about the unseen folks that are homeless or that could be homeless soon, and protecting and making sure that we're protecting housing as much as possible. So that's a big piece of that Sea Level Rise project. And then the other piece about budget is, we do need to find other ways to fund it. If we want to do some more of these activities, the majority of what we're doing isn't really costing us that much. When we do things like upgrade chargers, we typically do get some funding from outside sources. So we're not using general funds for most of what we're doing right now. And then I thought Christine could answer the pieces on methane and that percentage of waste emissions and solid waste and food waste. And then I can come back and address that whole piece around EV chargers and public land.
Okay, sure. So first of all, methane is a much more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. It's about 28 more times more potent than carbon dioxide when you're looking at 100-year values. So that's how much, what the impact is over a 100-year time period when the gas kind of starts to dissipate. When we do the emissions inventories, we do convert everything into something that's called carbon dioxide equivalents. I think I said that word, but I didn't explain what it was. So we do kind of weight the different greenhouse gases. So that 3% is 3%. It's equivalent to the other sources of emissions. It is a 100-year value. I could get into the weeds on this one if you're, no, okay, I won't do that then. The solid waste is the total waste that is put into the landfill. So that includes more than just food waste, but it does include food waste. It is the organic waste, however, that decomposes and creates the methane. So that is food waste, but it's other things as well. It could be wood, anything that comes from an organic material.
We've actually been talking about public land and use of EV chargers. We need EV chargers at workplaces. We need EV chargers for people in multifamily housing, as was mentioned. And it's very challenging for us to be experts in that. And so we are actually talking to TAM and others around the county about making sure that that's a piece of this implementation of our EV strategy, and looking at ways that we can enable public-private partnerships to be able to do that better without us having to own it and run it and understand it and be responsible for all the maintenance and all the maintenance costs and all the staff time that goes into that. It's a very important piece. So it does make the public-private partnership very appealing and something worth pursuing. So we're definitely doing that. Don't have any good answers for you right now, but it's one of the priority things that we're looking at for implementation of the EV strategy.
Thank you. Any additional questions before I ask for comments? Okay, Vice Mayor, go ahead with your comments, please.
Thank you, Mayor Kate. Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Christine, for delivering this report tonight. I think what's clear, my takeaway is this, that the report showed what the city itself is doing as an entity, what the residents of the city of San Rafael are doing. And Christine, thank you for coloring outside the lines a little bit and commenting on, how we might contemplate impacts that go beyond what was being measured. I think that those are actually really critical too. As we consider different personas in our community, there are clearly those in the community that have affluence that can make a lot of options are available. And then, as we look further afield to folks who have less affluence, how do we make certain that we can create more options? I like how it was explained that we want to remove barriers. So I really like that idea and the opportunities that you articulated around making even just one day a week, making a different decision. How do we reduce that barrier? Whether it's to go grocery shopping. So I like this idea of affording more options to our community. So thank you for sharing it that way, because as we remove the low-hanging fruit, it's going to become more and more important that we're getting really integrated. I like how you talked about that and how we think about this. I like the idea of, as we continue to think about what does housing actually mean in our community, it means potentially fewer people needing to commute from other communities outside into San Rafael to do their work. So thank you for this report and look forward to seeing you not too distant future, Corey, on the next readout in a couple months. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Kurtz.
Thank you both. I know you are the messengers and not because it really becomes the responsibility of all of us to make these types of changes, not just from a council perspective of what we can do from a policy potentially, but really as individuals. And so I really appreciate the information you've provided. I had thought we actually might see some additional reduction with the message of we might, maybe that's because of work from home. And so I was a little disappointed. We're not seeing that, but it also supports what we do know is so many people have to drive into our community. And we need to figure out based on that, what can we do specifically for that community that has to drive to San Rafael to support our community? Because that's where it's happening. And I know that's going to go back to housing, which is a bigger conversation as well. But when I look at 2030, and we talk about dog years, 2030, 6 years, and city years is about 10 minutes. And so I just, I'm really concerned of what we need to do and setting that expectation of really what can we achieve by 2030, because we can't achieve all of these, I don't think, all these goals just based on the limited amount of time we have. And now in the next 6 years, thinking realistically, what can we achieve and what can we do to make that happen? Thank you.
Comments. Councilmember Lorenz Gulati, who's also our representative on Marin at Climate Energy, as well as our liaison to the Climate Change Action Plan.
Yes.
Yep. Spit that out.
Yeah, no, I really wanted to thank you for this report, but bigger, like for everything you do, because I think we have such limited resources in our city. And this is like a global problem. It's happening in the entire world. And when we are talking about sea level rise, how can you decide, San Rafael is not San Rafael, it's the Bay, and it's affecting a lot of different areas. So I think the plan is, I like to see the data. I like to see the actions that they are very focused. When we are talking about climate, change, like actions, we can do so many different things. So I really like the fact that we prioritize. I mean, like farming is definitely one of the biggest ones that can be done, but not so much in San Rafael, maybe growing our own gardens and having our own compost and, but I really want to appreciate the knowledge, the skills that you have for partnerships, because we have amazing partners in our community. And we cannot do it alone. So how we leverage that partnership, where we are actually moving the needle. I mean, when we were looking at this, when you were looking at this plan, a few years back, it's hard to imagine, but it is happening. And there are so many different things that we can do, from like going and shopping juice stores. And I mean, there is a change of mentality that as a city, I think we are really small, and yet I think we can really move the needle again. So I just wanted to recognize that. I'm a board member as a liaison for the council with MCE Clean Energy. I know that we are always looking, to get like green energy and what else can we do, like opening new solar farms and really keeping those rates for energy low compared to PG&E, so people can really make the change without being affected. Because I think when we are thinking about climate change, we have to think about equity and how difficult it is for some people to change certain habits, like going grocery shopping, where I guess you can bring your own bag, but in some places, maybe buying food, you have to buy with all this packaging because you don't have access to organic food. So I think there are like a lot of things that we can do. And I'm optimist, maybe because of the people working here, because of our community, and because of our youth as well. So I just want to congratulate you on the work that you are doing, and I'm here to support you in any way that I can. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'll agree with my colleagues. Great report. Although that first slide, it's kind of hard to come back from that one. That one's just, I mean, that's the facts of what's happening in our world. And really having that cross-jurisdictional approach. Somerville, we've been a leader. We were the first one to get the Beacon Award. So I appreciate how you continue to lead, and your staff, Kate, continue to really advance the issues, and working with MCEP, Marine Climate Energy Partnership, because we have to do it with them. In addition, there are other stakeholders here. As I mentioned, we had a letter from Warren Wells of MCBC, Marin County Bicycle Coalition, talking about how we need to have our community reduce vehicle miles traveled. We can't do that alone. That's with our stakeholders, and we'll continue to work. I mean, he made really good points in his letter, and absolutely. With the chamber, we talked about the low green carbon economy. I'm not sure it has something like that. It's called equitable, mouthful. But how do you have that intersection that you talked about of having people who can work here, the auto training program that you're talking about? So how do we think about things differently? And you hear the support from our council. We're on board for thinking creatively, and I think we hear it throughout Marin County. And yes, we are a drop in the proverbial bucket. And if we were all saying, oh, we're just such a small part and none of us had that behavior, to me, that doesn't seem that we are addressing what we need to be doing in our world, or adhering to the values that we have of our planet. And we can get into deep philosophical things. Well, there are bigger countries doing other things. 100%, yes, that's true. And we're going to continue to show up here. Many of us in this room have offspring and kids, and I think about the world that we are leaving for them. So when they ask us when we are in our elder years, what did we do? How did we show up? And to be able to answer that question, oh, this is what I did as a policymaker, as a community member, as staff, is really, really important. So in spite of the daunting task of reducing 40%, I know that we are committed to do that here in San Rafael, and having these reminders and having this report and the great people working on it, will continue to make progress. That's all we can keep doing. And I have great books that I read about this exact issue. So if you're interested, let me know, because it definitely keeps you inspired about what are we doing for the next generation. I know tonight we are not voting on anything, but we are accepting. So I will turn to Councilmember Micah as our rep to CCAP. If you could go ahead and make the motion, that would be great.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to accept the greenhouse gas inventory reports for 2022 and the fiscal year 2023-2025 two-year work plan priorities update.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Hill.
Aye.
Councilmember Kurtz.
Aye.
Councilmember Yadin Scolati.
Aye.
Mayor Kate.
Aye, that motion carries 4-0. Thank you so much for your work. We appreciate you.
Before we adjourn the meeting, we have open time for public expression. This is comments from the public on topics that we did not cover. Now is your chance.
Alvatary Gersel Park. I've been thinking about this for a while and I don't have a report written and might write something up and send it, but let me just introduce the subject to you. It may ring true and you'll say, oh, we know that, we're taking care of it. But it basically goes something like this. There's really no incentive for renters to participate in any programs the city puts together because there's no reward for them to convert something simple like putting solar panels on their windows so they can reduce their electric expense and reduce the footprint from using fossil fuels. It's not something that they would be incentivized to do. There is technology that allows it, but there's no encouragement in that area. And it's like there are other things like something simple. We were talking about leaf management, just cleaning up around your property, outside your property, get leaves out of the street is not something they would do. So, well, why would they do that? I don't get anything out of it or anything. I don't get any reward. And there's probably other examples of recycling that could be leveraged in such a way that would be encouraged and allow renters. I'm a renter, obviously. I'm thinking of myself in this regard. But we do represent, I think, 48% of the population of San Rafael. So this is a strong constituency, and having them engaged in such a way as to reduce things like greenhouse gases is something that really the city should be, or us, the residents, should be thinking about it. How do we make that happen? How do we incentivize them? And something as ridiculous as, oh, I can't give you any money, but you can earn credits. And if you earn enough credits, I'll put a homeless person into a house. And I know people go, I'll do anything to get that done. And that's the end of my time. But that's generally the concept, the idea.
Thank you. Anyone else have any comments? Yep, come on down.
This is going to seem silly to you, but
Hold the microphone a little closer to your mouth. Thank you.
my name is Jack Wilkinson. I live in San Rafael and I come downtown a lot and I park my car and I put money in the meter. The problem is it's hard for me to see the numbers on the meters. Can you make them any darker, any bolder? Yesterday I put money in and I pushed the button and it turned out I bought 3 hours for a 20-minute park. So we made some money there. But the point is, it's hard to read all those meters. This probably isn't the place, but you're the only people I'm talking to. Thank you.
Great comment. We'll make sure the city manager passes that along. And we laughed, not because we didn't agree, but because we've all been there. So. Any other comments? Not seeing any. Thank you for a great meeting this evening. We are adjourned.